Hi, good evening, good morning, wherever you are. This is Marc Ray live from Normandy on the project Camelot TV. I'm hosting again tonight Wayne Bush, live from Texas. Hi, Wayne, how are you?
Hi, Mark. I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Good, good, good. This is our second interview, and the first one was really exciting and fascinating about this big game of life and the holographic illusion we live in, and this type of matrix world that we're imprisoned in. And you give us some clues and evidence and supporting evidence on all types of aspects of life. And tonight we're going to focus on a specific aspect of what the NDEs are about, the near-death experience. Tell us about your site and yourself for those who haven't seen the first interview first.
Okay. Well, I like long walks on the beach. Oh, no, I'm just kidding. I was a computer programmer for like over 20 years, and I finally retired and got out of that rat race. Now I can pretty much dedicate myself full time to this. I guess you could call it a passion or a hobby of mine. For those who didn't hear the first interview, my website posits that life ultimately is a cosmic game or play, a divine drama that we dream. Thus, it's a simulation or illusory in nature. And we've chosen to play a role or a character in a movie or play like a reality TV show. You could call it the True Man Show. The plot of this story or drama is similar to that of many Hollywood movies. That is a villain and its henchmen have imprisoned a planet and are feeding off its inhabitants who need rescuing. The prison planet in this case is Earth, its inhabitants humans, and the villain is an extraterrestrial or interdimensional entity who has most commonly been referred to as the devil or Satan, and who we will see as the Lord of this earth and most worshipped as God. To avoid confusion with the true God, I'll refer to this false God as the NDErs, which is the term Gnostics use. And they called his minions archons, which is a Greek term which means ruler. This is because we've given away our sovereign powers through consent and have allowed them to rule over us. They've been able to do this by imprisoning our souls in the physical body and keeping our consciousness at a superficially low level by bonding it to earth. And any screenwriter in Hollywood knows that every good story must have drama, most notably conflict. The part of the climax of the story is getting mankind to wake up from this lower frequency of consciousness or dream state in which we've fallen and remember and claim our true origin. Now, the topic of this interview is near-death experiences, and I will note the commonalities, but we'll try to focus on the anomalies or some of the more problematic experiences. And rather than just spouting my opinions or stating things as fact, I'm going to try to include as many first-hand quotes from actual near-death experiences as I can. I've identified around 50 interesting categories, and I'll present a few quotes from each category, but keep in mind there are typically at least 2 or 3 dozen more quotes for each category, which all can be found on my website on the page on the light. Well, most of the quotes come from this fantastic website, NDErs.org, which is the Near-Death Experiences Research Foundation website, run by Jeff and Judy Long, and it includes over 4,000 near-death experiences on it. And I'll note the exceptions when possible.
Right, right. So you'll be quoting quite a few amazing near-death experiences, stories now, and to back up this game of lies in our divine dramatic life, which may be a dream then. Great, how exciting. Is this material also relevant to the few human beings who don't believe in reincarnation?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to be touching on about 50 different categories having to do with NDEs, and reincarnation is just one of the subjects, although it's an important one since it would mean we keep returning to Earth. And even if someone doesn't believe that reincarnation exists, the information I'll be sharing is still important as it has to do with where the spirit goes after death. I personally feel we're eternal spirits and might get easily bored being able to manifest whatever we like, whenever we want. So I have a feeling we created an environment where we personally limited ourselves as a challenge or game. And I like to present a few quotes from near-death experiences that came back with the distinct impression that life on Earth is a game or some form of entertainment. David J. said, I asked him what the meaning of life is. He told me for the entertainment of the spirit realm. Monty said, in reality, I do remember the feeling that life was sort of like a game, maybe even a game I had chosen a role to play in. Dwayne S. said, I was also reminded that the reason we leave the celestial realm at all was for the excitement, variety, adventure, and entertainment that different incarnations offer. As one entity jokingly remarked, if the eternal divine part of us grows tired of singing and playing harps, there are thousands of other universes created for our spiritual growth, amusement, and entertainment. Eternity is a long time to do nothing but play harps. And Nancy D said, it's my understanding that what transpired during my NDE is the real reality. Life as a human is more like a dream, role in a play, virtual reality game, character in a drama, etc. SJ said, I'm more interested now in the theories that what we experience as our universe is something like a holographic projection or something akin to a video game, or that we are souls operating in this plane using atomic avatars. Zach S. said, it appeared as a cosmic game board between two opposing entities. Pamela K. said, I'm more willing to let things go because I see them as part of the game of life. And Kevin E. said, I have that instant recognition that this life is a gift and that we're all actors in this giant universal divine script. Kathleen W. said, human beings do what they do because they are engrossed in their life, and interactions happen because they are playing out a script, and you cross their paths and become a character they need to complete a scene. Mike M. said, it's our gift to experience, where we all play roles and have the freedom to change the script at any time. Brian T. said, I could see life as though it were a game I'd been playing and how all the moves were just parts of the game. And finally, Myra S. said, I realized that the real goal of the mind-created life game in life was to remove the veil of delusion and ignorance and reach the ultimate truth of one's reality in life itself. End quote.
Yes, sorry, I had the sound turned off.
I couldn't hear you. I was about to tell you that.
Some NDE experiencers show supporting evidence that we live in a virtual, fractal, holographic game, some sort of a computer game, a real matrix, right?
Yes, that's right. And here are a few NDEs where this world was perceived to be a hologram or virtual reality simulation. Brian T. said, my experience was of a realm more real than this. I now believe this is an illusion, a simulation of virtual reality. Sure, it's as real as we think it is, right down to the constituents of atoms and laws of physics. It's amazing, but the picture on our TV seems real. We just understand how the pixels come to be there. Jack C. said, experience was definitely real. It was like a computer game running in the background. Arlene H. said, we are not flesh and blood, more like holograms. Romy said, I was connected to everybody in a multifaceted light web, a DNA-like hologram that was in perfect order. James H. said, I could see a green grid made of light flowing under me. Marie W. said, I was traveling through planetary systems and solar systems and things called universal grid systems. Stanley S. said, we live in an illusion of this earthly life inside our bodies, while our spirits, our souls, are trapped within us. Veronica A. said, somehow I began to move through some kind of brightly colored geometric figures that served as a sort of matrix, yet I did not feel alone. Haffer said, that everything is part of an essential game of life itself. That's why this temporal human illusory creation exists as though it were a matrix within another matrix, and this within another. Multi-dimensionality until we wake up. Mary D. said, I drifted through the field, not in any particular spot, and I observed how particles were organized in this matrix. And in the matrix, the particles were not touching each other. Not a single one was touching any of the other ones. They emitted a light, and the rays of light from one reached the rays of light from the other, and they entangled. And those lines of energy kept the distance stabilized. Peter N. said, at times it seemed to me as if the space was not all simply space as we understand it. It has some kind of matrix structure within it. Linda G. said, I was being shown this in my mind, the universe in a multi-dimensional grid, but not exactly. I saw various planes crossing and intersecting. I was given the picture of a grid in my mind with energy that was vibrating at different speeds. And Linda S. said, the lights, a connection to the humans, which were glinting off the beams, were so bright and expansive, they interconnected, forming a sort of light grid. I remembered reports and books on the near-death experience of people seeing grids on the other side that they didn't know how to explain. So near-death experiencers say the experience is more real than everyday normal waking consciousness. In fact, many say that this life is a dream or an illusion. Jesse N said, that's what it felt like, waking up from a dream, waking up to who I truly am, and this life was nothing but a dream. Daniel A said, actually, the other side is more real than the physical realm. The earth plane life is more like a dream when contrasted. And Marc said, I felt more awake than I'd ever felt, as if this earthly life was but a dream, and true consciousness happens after death. End quote.
Yes, actually, I felt that way in some of my dreams sometimes. So if the real life is after this life, here we are in nothing more than a dream, right? And have NDErs, NDE experiencers described our soul? I think that's what you'll be discussing next. What have they described the soul, our soul, as being like?
Yeah, the real life is after this life, and here on Earth we're about as dead as we will be, and we are the walking dead. So yeah, near-death experiencers say that the soul is a luminous egg made of translucent liquid light. It's a liquid or fluorescent light, or like a plasma field. John C. said, I was translucent. Gregory C. said, I observed another spirit entering the room. It wasn't as large as me because I was pure plasma, a growing bodiless form that was pure energy and intelligence. Leonard said, then I looked at myself and I was light. I was made of light. However, at some point I had not this light body anymore. I was just a point of consciousness in the universe. The more we love, the more we emit light because we vibrate faster. End quote. So NDEs reveal that a soul sheds its physical body and lower animal, everyday normal waking consciousness or ego and experiences the afterlife with the true expanded consciousness or awareness of the soul, which is described as pure consciousness. Souls experience this state as super consciousness whether they go to the light or not. Matilda N. said, consciousness remained totally alert, linked to this luminous flow to such an extent that it dissolved in it. I was this refined, sublime consciousness. Bruce C. said, it was a totally different type of consciousness. It was without any constraints. Jeff C. said, I would no longer call it consciousness. It's a self-identity separate from consciousness, more like a super consciousness. Denise said, I realized I was pure energy, spirit, and part of a flowing consciousness while still remaining Denise. And J.H. said, it was two entirely different types of alertness and consciousness. Victor C., which was a spiritually transformative experience, said the best way that I can describe it is that the state was beyond the need for thoughts or senses. Thoughts and senses are things that in my view pertain to consciousness. Where I was, it was a state of pure awareness beyond consciousness and therefore the need of thoughts or senses, end quote.
Wow, they really seem to access a much higher level of consciousness where traveling in a flash is not an issue. It's you know, their consciousness travels at any rate of speed, right?
That's right. And I think at the highest level, NDEs are driven by consciousness, travels by intent, desire, or thought, and most claim they can travel instantaneously or at extremely high speeds. Dr. Jean Renee H. said travel was easy simply by desire. Pamela B. said it was an energy travel, like we set our intention and away we went. Alan M. said travel is also by thought, both into the physical and ethereal dimensions of realities. Brian Z. said, I felt that I could move at the speed of light, as if I was propelled by thought rather than body. What existed was pure will. Ann S. said, high-speed travel, gliding rather than walking, and flying. Easy transition from standing to flying as if by thought or wish, end quote. Here's an account of from Gigas, who emailed me about her experience in the void. She said, the first time I entered the black void, I was afraid. I knew I had to breathe, but there was no air there. I knew I thirsted, but there was no water there. I knew I needed to be warm, but there was no warmth there. I was afraid, and then a calm came over me. I had no need for any of that. I was a conscious form in a black void where I became aware I was a sphere of light with no sense of direction, just the blackness and feeling released from all the pain learned in the physical realm. It was beautiful, pleasant, and I was unchained, free from everything I'd known before. I was truly free of the suffering bondage back there in the body. James E. said, I was in a void, completely black, but yet it felt endless. I saw nothing, only black, but yet I could feel there was a down, there was an up, a ledge, a wall. As I walked down the wall in the void, I felt as if it lasted forever. Once I entered the light, it seemed to last just a few moments. End quote. Mellon Thomas Benedict had an extensive NDE where he went to a light beyond the first light and also to a void. He wrote, "As I passed into the second light, I expanded beyond the first light. I found myself in a profound stillness beyond all silence. I could see or perceive forever, beyond infinity. I was in the void. I was in pre-creation before the Big Bang. I had crossed over the beginning of time, the first word, the first vibration. I was in the eye of creation. I felt as if I was touching the face of God. It was not a religious feeling. Simply I was at one with absolute life and consciousness. I can tell you this now. The void is less than nothing, yet more than everything that is. The void is absolute zero. Chaos forming all possibilities. It is absolute consciousness, much more than even universal intelligence. What mystics call the void is not a void. It is so full of energy, a different kind of energy that has created everything that we are." He says, "Where is the void? I know. The void is inside and outside everything. You, right now, even while you live, are always inside and outside the void simultaneously. You don't have to go anywhere or die to get there. The void is the vacuum or nothingness between all physical manifestations, the space between atoms and their components. I was in the void and I was aware of everything that had ever been created. It was like I was looking out of God's eyes."
Isn't it something that some humans would call maybe the 0 point energy point,
Yeah,
in time?
exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of strong similarities there. I received some emails from a woman in Florida, and she wrote, "I've been reviewing your article on and off for the past year. It changed my perspective on the afterlife immensely. Last year, I had a serious accident. I was in and out of a coma for days, having spent 2 weeks in the intensive care unit. One thing I do remember is when I lost consciousness, plunging into total darkness, no bright light, no deceased family members. As the months passed by, a feeling of absolute love and peace would resonate from within me, still does. Strangers seem to be curious about me. At night, as I'm drifting off to sleep, internally my head will start to glow." She said, "I had read your article months before my accident, and so in essence it stayed with me. As I'm lying on my hospital bed, I had momentary lucid thoughts which were not to project any expectations of angels, guides, etc. I was not going to be lied to, is why I am guessing the immersion into the void. Once I started to regain lucidity, one of the nurses confessed to me that she would often come into my room when I was unconscious because she said the room would fill with a feeling of peacefulness. This woman then went out of her way to take such loving care of me. At times, this divine love within me is so intense, I sometimes burst into tears, and my happiest moments are spent in solitude at peace." End quote.
Right. No expectation of an external guides. Actually, that she kept your advice in mind. Intense feelings of absolute consciousness and divine love seem to have prevailed in your description of the void and darkness on the other side. Right?
Yeah, it is a higher state of consciousness, and love is often felt even if one doesn't go to the light. Not all void experiences were pleasant. I forget exactly how much, but I think 2/3 or 70% or so of the void experiences were pleasant. I studied whether souls choose to go to the light or whether they are pulled there automatically. It's my opinion that by far the vast majority more or less go automatically to the light. Virtually all of them seem to want to go to the light, so they weren't trying to avoid it or anything. I think they went there through their desire. But I would say most were automatically pulled there, and some just found themselves in the light without even going through a tunnel. You may have the free will to decide not to go to the light, but few exercise that will. When I became, Barry L. said, "When I became to desire the light, as I felt a connection of warmth or love or desiring to be closer to the light, it immediately moved and rapidly closer and began to vibrate at faster frequency. The message was simply love." Andrew S. said, "I then felt as much as I saw a light ahead, intense but not painful. I felt an overwhelming desire to go into it." Douglas H. said, "It's a very bright light that seems to absorb you into it when you reach it." Asui said, "I felt attracted as if magnetized by a light which attracts me. The closer I come to this light, the more I feel well. A feeling of peace, love, well-being, fullness. This light attracts me and I lose sight of my terrestrial body. I go towards this light which absorbs me more and more. I never felt such total well-being before in my life." Sherry A. said, "My thought was, oh, what is that? The moment I thought it, I moved forward, almost like my curiosity propelled me. The more curious I got, the faster I propelled forward, like flying. It felt incredibly freeing." Douglas H. said, "Then I became aware of something like a tunnel, and I remember feeling drawn toward it." Nan A. said, "I saw a dark tunnel and began to travel out of the top of my head and through it. I continued flowing through this expanse without control as I felt I was being pulled or controlled through this process. And Danielle V said, at that moment, or maybe 1 second later, I felt myself leaving my body. I found I was in a tube and I was being sucked towards the light. I went further because I wanted to go to the light, end quote.
Wow, it looks like they feel drawn to the light, like some sort of soul control mechanism or light technology. Not much free will described there.
Well, I know it seems that way from the accounts. They desire to go to the light and are attracted to it, so they're drawn there. But they want to go there, and it's not as if they're fighting against going there. But it does seem as if they're not in control. Of course, we've been conditioned here on Earth to believe we're not in control of our afterlife, and many of the NDEs are indeed NDErs are sent back to Earth against their free will, or sort of tricked into redirecting their thoughts back to Earth to a loved one that needs them. Once one has entered their domain, then one could become subject to their game and rules. There could be a soul control mechanism or light technology involved. There are reports of a city of crystal with domes and a tower, and crystal is used in computers, memory, and transducers and receivers.
And also the beings of light, right?
Yeah. The NDErs described the light as being as bright as 1,000 suns, yet did not hurt their eyes. Lloyd P. said, the light was like a boundary, but it was transparent. I passed through into the light. I was blinded by the light, unable to see anything, but the light did not hurt your eyes. It was like looking in at the sun 1,000,000 times over with pure white light. I felt warm, safe, peaceful, and in the presence of pure, unconditional love. It was like the light was absorbing me. I know I was in the presence of God. Laura L. said, then in another second, I was standing on a river made of liquid light. There was grass and landscape, but it was all made of this light or had the light in it. I was just pure consciousness with no body, Anthony M. said it. In the other place, I had physical form, but my body, like everything else there was made of liquid light. Jill D. said, the pulsating liquid light that radiated peace, joy, and love. Chris D. said, suddenly I felt as if I was in a bright light. It was tinged with blue and silver, like a plasma ball you see on sci-fi movies. There was an electricity to the ether. Francisca R. Said, my impression was that the whole heaven was made of this plasma, and I could not get in because my body wasn't subtle enough to get into the plasma. Joe B. said, as my awareness increased, it became apparent that this white light was a knowing light. It seemed to be in love with me, amused at me, and intimately knowledgeable of every nuance of my being. Despite any of my foibles, eccentricities, poor decisions, and plain old humanness, it loved me to the core. Now, Pan Reynolds was told by people on the other side that God is not the light is what happens when God breathes. August said, upon seeing the shimmering light that is indescribably beautiful, I had a revelation. This light is not, in the strictest sense, God, in the traditional meaning of the Bibles of various religions, including Christianity. This light, which is an energy gestalt, is an aggregation of many multitudes of immortal souls from all walks of life, for example, plants, mammals, fish, and is collectively a life force. This one is not from NDErs.org, but from Joe McMonagle, who's a well-known remote viewer. He says, for a long time, I was absolutely convinced that the white light was God. I'm not convinced of that now. The experience is still just as real in my mind as the day it happened, but I've since had a second near-death experience. In my second experience, I was fully prepared to go to the light again, to go where I knew was home. And I was not allowed to. I was allowed only to see it, but I was not allowed to enjoy it. So in the second experience, this confused me. It created a huge philosophical problem for me because by being able to see the light and not going to it, it showed me that the light had edges. My definition of God is that God cannot be a finite being. God can't have edges. What I believe the light is and what we are in totality when we're no longer a physical being. We're pure energy beings, and we're created in the image and likeness of God, but that isn't God, end quote.
Right. Not a finished image. This next part is about the fluorescence of the light in the NDEs. It reminds me of the fluorescent markings after alien abductions.
Yeah, that is interesting indeed. Many creatures in the deep ocean use fluorescence and bioluminescence. A French biologist working on a firefly called Pyrophorus deciphered the chemistry responsible for the firefly's magical glow. He determined its result of reaction between two chemicals, luciferin and luciferase, which he named for the fallen angel Lucifer, the light bearer. Biofluorescence is an odd property because the animals don't actually produce any light, but rather filter the light of the sun. And Lucifer is also named phosphor. I suspect this light bearing is due to phosphorescence. Phosphorescence is a specific type of photoluminescence related to fluorescence. Fluorescence is the emission of light by a substance that has absorbed light or other electromagnetic radiation. Phosphorescence is related to fluorescence, which absorbs light and then re-emits it. This would be similar to how the demiurge was described as being a filter for the light, and also the Gnostics' description of him stealing light. Nearly 36 mentioned the light on the other side as being fluorescent or possessing an otherworldly luminescence. Udon T said, the next I remember I was seeming to become part of everything, but moving with huge fluorescent light structures that formed waves and were perfect in size and movement, and the light was perfect. T.O. said, well, I didn't have a white light, but there was a wonderful, calming, warm, homey light that was a color I'd never seen before. The only way I can describe it is a violet, white, blue, fluorescent type color. It was almost like a pool of color or presence that was radiating so tremendously. Tony P. said, I found myself in a tunnel illuminated by a faint, foggy light. As I went through it, I found myself at a fork in the tunnel where it split in two. I could make out a light at the very end of one of the tunnels, so that's the one I took. As I went along, I came across an identical branching of the tunnel. Having counted 450 branches and tunnels, I found myself outdoors in a forest of vibrant colors, a fluorescent green with a colossal tree in the center.
Well, yeah. yeah, and they also describe cloudy, misty light, right?
Yeah, I found 75 cases where the light and its surroundings were described as being cloudy or misty or having clouds and mist. This is another indication that the light is not the pure divine light, but an incoherent white light, unless there are several lights of varying intensity and purity. But Geraldine A.S. said, then as instantly as I rose, I was instantly present within something that resembled a cloud. I don't say it was a cloud, but it was bright, white, and soft. I felt the total embrace of love. Joe W. said, the next thing that happened was that I was walking in clouds. Walking in clouds like in the movie Heaven Can Wait. It was bright light. I had some feeling that I was not in my human body, but in my spiritual body. Roy S. said, those clouds that are in heaven are not the kind you see on earth. They seem to dance, those white floating clouds. I spent a lot of time staring at them. Paul said, I saw beings standing there within a great white cloud backed by a white light. It was like they were standing on and within this beautiful white cloud that was surrounded by light. The cloud rose up among them, but it was more dense around their feet. Chantel L. said, I found myself floating like in a cloud. There were no buildings, no structures, just light and love. Raymond H. said, I was in the misty light. The mist itself was a being of sorts. It was a misty light, but it really wasn't light. It was emotion, peace, love, everything combined to form a mist. And Christine E. said, there was a white mist surrounding me. I was unable to see through it, except that it was a brilliant white light, as if the sun was shining behind the clouds.
Could that misty light or those clouds be some type of an anesthetic process or screen memories for the soul? Next, you'll be quoting what the NDErs are saying about the tunnel, the pipe, the vortex. It's the core episode for the afterlife trickery, isn't it?
Yeah. Good observation, Mark. Good magicians also make use of smoke and mirrors. The smoke or clouds makes it more difficult to see what is really going on and can cloud one's judgment, perhaps. You know, the shadow was said to be able to cloud the minds of men. I think mist or sprays are used in anesthetics too, if I'm not mistaken. Anesthesia numbs the pain and also brings the consciousness level down into a state of amnesia, sleep, or hypnosis. I'll touch on hypnosis a bit later on. The soul is often described as being in a state of relaxation, and there are suggestions and commands given. There is sometimes music and color, especially as one travels or spins through the tunnel. That seems to be the classic depiction of hypnosis too, a spiral which produces a vortex or tunnel effect. The tunnel is frequently encountered by those who go to the light, and it's also described as a vortex, pipe, tube, hose, vent, spiral, or rings. It may be a portal or wormhole to another dimension. There are predominantly two tunnels reported. One arches upward toward the light and the other downward towards a darker, less pleasant experience. Some of the common traits associated with the tunnel are vibration, color, music, wind, magnetism, and electricity. There are several destinations on the other side of the light. Many talk about a garden, park, which is perhaps the park that Robert Monroe mentions. There was a river of life that souls ride on, or sometimes acts as a barrier to the other side. There's quite often a crystal city mentioned with a dome and a tower. There's an area which reminds souls of a waiting room and a hall where they're sometimes greeted by dead relatives. Some say the tunnel is just a matter of moving so quickly through space. What's particularly interesting is that a few experiencers actually mention it being an illusion. Matt S. said, I did not go down the tunnel, but I saw outside of it in the near distance. I saw a tube projecting up at about a 45-degree angle, much like a pipe in the ground. Above it, approximately 2 mouth diameters away, were 2 very bright white lights. These lights pivoted toward the target soul ascending the tunnel and paused for a few seconds while the soul entered the light. The light would then pivot like a searchlight towards another soul and pause again while the soul entered the light. Both lights were identical and moved similar, but independently. I knew that those were souls entering the light. Martine said, I opened my eyes and saw that I was enclosed in a tube of brilliant, golden, vibrating, living light. Nan A. said, I saw a dark tunnel and began to travel out of the top of my head and through it. It seemed as if passing through a spiral tunnel, Mariana C. said. Cam said, the tunnel is an entrance and exit into the grids. This is the crossover of life. We are judged in the grid world. The tunnel goes down to its lower level, and you did not perform virtuously in this life. If the tunnel goes up, go with it, you have performed virtuously. Only the grid dimension, which is the gateway. Nancy D. said, immediately I was surrounded by an earthenworks tunnel in vivid, vibrant color and detail with the proverbial light at the end. Though the tunnel was just as real as anything I've experienced on Earth, I knew that I was not in a tunnel, so I wasn't fooled by its appearance. Upon realizing that I wasn't fooled, a flood of knowings about manifesting reality inundated my mind. I realized that we all constantly manifest what we call physical reality just by virtue of our thoughts, and that the only reason we are fooled into believing it is real is because of the limitations of human senses. Jacob said, there was a vortex of white fire spiraling through space. It was a beautiful sight and looked very much like the electricity coming from a nuclear power generator. There were voices calling me to join this energy. Some voices were familiar, but most were not. I looked at the energy and said firmly, no, I want my own. No sooner had I thought it, a very slim pillar of white fire appeared a distance from the large one. I said with satisfaction, that is mine.
And nuclear power is not a clean, safe energy, as most of the French people are led to believe. I just want to add that to the text, to the quotes.
Right.
The next topic implies memories of a wheel during NDEs, like the Wheel of Fortune, a casino-type wheel of karma game, leading to reincarceration, or rebirth, right?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the Wheel of Fortune. I'd had that in an earlier draft, but took it out. And I also commented, my friend, that the roulette wheel or slot machine could be puns. I also think the lottery wheel is another example. I think a lot of the games and rides at fairs, circuses, and carnivals are inside jokes based on reality. Of course, there is the Ferris wheel at fairs, and the word Ferris is spelled differently, but it could perhaps even be a pun for a steel wheel that is somehow involved. A few NDErs, maybe 10 or so, remember seeing a wheel with slots or a mandala which consists of all our souls or lives and a sorting or placement into our next incarnation. The wheel could be similar to the tunnel, but it invokes images reminiscent of the wheel of rebirth. Wilson, who had a fear-death experience, said, the object resembled a giant water wheel lying on its side and rotating as it approached me and my vehicle. It was larger than what we think of as the world. As the object drew near to me, kind of sensation came over my person, and I knew exactly what this thing was. Not only that, I knew everything that pertained to it, what it was doing, what its business was with me, where and when I'd seen it before, why I was seeing it now, and many, many other things that I cannot now recall. I'd seen the object before I was born and will see it again when I die. We all knew it before we're born, and we'll all see it when we die. But this information is eclipsed from us while we are alive, and that was why I was seeing it now in the experience, because I was in the process of dying in a fatal car crash. The wheel wasn't something that moved towards me through the world or through reality somehow. That was an illusion that my senses were constructing for me. The wheel was reality itself. It represented every conceivable possibility for a life or for a world that could ever be envisioned or imagined. As it approached, I became aware that what we call our world was contained within it. It was simply one of the numberless slots or paddles in the water wheel. It had always been so. My life, your life, our world, all of us, we were a part of this wheel structure, and we had always been a part of this unit of the structure. The water wheel sort of rolled across me and then across the place where my car was on the road. As it did so, I began to be hit by each of the paddles in the wheel. I understood that I was about to be subject to the process that humans approximated with the term reincarnation. This was why the wheel had come. I represented a kind of discrepancy that had to be fixed. The event, or perhaps the imminent event on the highway, had caused me to slip out of or fall between the paddles on the wheel. This structure had some kind of cosmic purpose of sorting things into their correct natural place. I was afraid and resisted being sorted, so the wheel stepped up its aggressive attempts to sort me correctly. With this came another understanding that frightened me even more. I knew that unless I soon selected one of these realities to slide back into, that the wheel would coerce the situation by deciding for me. One way or another, I would be sorted, whether I liked it or not. If I didn't choose for myself, I'd simply be fitted into place at some nearest position on the wheel to the point where I failed to make the decision. I have no explanation for why I failed to experience any of the phenomena usually reported with the imminent death situations like the tunnel, the light, and so on. I suspect that imminent death experiences are symbolic scenarios that flash up just as someone is entering or exiting the wheel, but before the situation has developed very far. At no stage did I see anything whatever that resembled what we humans would think of as an afterlife or spirit world or life after death realm. It's as if we are either on the outer surface of the wheel itself in one of its realized worlds, or else we are dead and we are the wheel itself. The wheel is a space where all uncreated possibility exists, but nothing completed or actual. And bear in mind that nothing was concealed from me. I was the all, and I knew the all. I certainly don't retain it or pretend to, but I knew it then. The wheel didn't seem bothered one way or the other. It didn't seem to matter to it whether I emerged again in 3 minutes' time or 3 decades' time. All it cared about was sorting me, and there was a kind of ruthlessness to this that I'll soon not forget. I found myself back on the highway in what seemed to be a very short distance back up the road, still approaching the intersection. I remember the look on that driver's face as clearly as if it were yesterday. I remember him bracing back on the wheel, but I braked as I reached the intersection, and that driver or his car was simply nowhere to be seen. End quote. Kyle L. said, I collapsed into her room under a bed. I kept having these visions. I saw the reincarnation wheel sucking me in and spitting me out like a giant magnetic ball of fire that attracted souls and shoved them into bodies formed when they passed through. It was like a big sorting machine happening to thousands of souls at once. Steve N. said, there was a spinning white light and a throbbing noise going wob, wob, wob at intervals of about 1 second or slightly less. It consisted of white and black spirals, like a hypnotist wheel. It may have been a spinning tunnel, spinning white light like a hypnotist wheel. CJ said, a soft, grinding, grating like a mill wheel as the tunnel rotated. Caroline R. said, to the right, I could clearly see a mandala. This wheel rotated very slowly, but also I had the feeling that this wheel could not be stopped, no matter what. Very solid, slow, relentless movement. This wheel had rings in it, and they rotated in the wheel. Inside this rotating wheel, I saw small black figures. They rotated with this wheel. And Mellon Thomas Benedict said, the light kept changing into different figures like Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, mandalas, archetypal images, and signs. As the light revealed itself to me, I became aware that what I was really seeing was our higher self matrix. The only thing I can tell you is that it turned into a matrix, a mandala of human souls. And what I saw was that what we call our higher self in each of us is a matrix. It's also a conduit to the source. Each one of us comes directly as a direct experience from the source. We all have a higher self or an oversoul part of our being.
Which would mean the light adjusts to the human archetypal comfort zone, culture, religious beliefs, multiple choices leading to the source or our higher self, or another matrix control system maybe.
Yeah, that's right. It does adjust to your cultural conditioning and caters to make us feel more comfortable. I think there are multiple levels to the control system. There's an NDEr named David who was taken through 7 heavens or levels, and those were probably all still within the false heavens. I feel our true nature is a spirit, and a spirit once trapped as many lives as different souls, whose memories combined could be turned an oversoul or a higher self. That's just all the combined experiences that your spirit has had as different souls or incarnations within the false system of the demiurge. Another scenario often mentioned on the other side is a garden, park, or meadow. Jorge R. said, I instantly found myself on a pathway like in a gigantic garden, and there was light, much light all around me. I felt a peace and tranquility that I've never felt since. I was walking on the path. I could see much vegetation, plants, flowers, trees, etc. Towards the end of the walkway, one saw an enormous central light, and it was as if a superior being interrogated me and asked me what I was doing there. Francisca R. said, we were walking a bit through the meadow. It was beautiful. Somewhere further back, a sparkling little brook was meandering through the grass. This brook was the border to heaven. On the opposite side of the meadow, there was a forest. Walking here was easy for me. Nancy R. said, when I was there, a landscape of gently rolling hills surrounded me. Flower-filled, grassy meadows spread out on the hills around me. There were huge, deciduous trees in full leaf. The trees were larger and grander than any here on Earth and surrounded the meadows.
So they mentioned the river, right?
Yeah, near-death experiencers sometimes mention a river of life. Alan F. said, I then found myself moving rapidly far above the ground and then saw a beautiful ribbon of blue in the distance, which soon became a very broad, glassy surfaced river as I first turned and hovered over it, at which point it spoke in the same way out of the life that was within it. River of life. Wayne H. said, the wall beyond my gurney became transparent, and I was shown what appeared to be a flowing river. It was silver and shimmering as it flowed. The drops in the river were each a different color, yet all flowed together as one body of water. The main body of the flow was silvery, shimmering lights with different colored drops on the flow. I used the term river of life to describe the stream. There was an understanding of complete peace, happiness, and contentment without need or want coming from the river of life. End quote.
Could the river symbolize the life flow, the life stream that is connected to the water molecule, carrying all our memories and vibrations, which is leading us to our next part, the NDEs and the vibration, the colors, the rainbow, the music, the tone, and the wind?
Well, in ancient Sumer and also Greece, a river played a large part in the afterlife. In Greece, a ferryman would ferry souls along the river Styx to their destination. In near-death experiences, a river or stream, too, is often reported, and sometimes in conjunction with a meadow or garden scene. Other times it's reported as a river of energy, a river of souls, or a stream of consciousness that connects everything together. As a stream of consciousness, it could perhaps carry memories. And the internet essentially is a collection of interconnected pipes that carry the flow of information. A frequent occurrence among near-death experiences is the mention of vibration, especially while in the tunnel. But they also talk about their own frequency or vibration increasing to a higher level. Amy C. said it was about who the person was, not what label they wore or who or what they worshipped or believed in. Your own frequency, tone, mathematical equation, and vibration says it all. You can't tinker with that. You just are who you are. She said, we were traveling upward, I suppose. My own vibration was changing. There was a big change in frequency, like I was tuning into a different radio station on a grand scale. I was out in the universe, and I was giving a kind of show, end quote. A rainbow of color is often seen in the tunnel, including some colors which don't exist here on Earth. The colors are iridescent. But Ad G said, but on the internet, I read a story about the Rainbow Bridge. Both the story and the depicted image of the gate corresponded to a fair amount of my own experience. Marisol S. said, it was all the colors of the rainbow in stripes, or red, yellow, green, blue, purple, etc. And I said to myself, I'm not staying here. And Rebecca J. said, then suddenly I was somewhere else. I saw the most beautiful colors like a swirling rainbow tunnel. It was so bright. I saw shadowy figures like angels.
They speak about music and tone as well, right?
Yeah, otherworldly music and tones. They call them beautiful music, and it's often heard in the tunnel, as well as chimes. Dr. Ralph H. said, I was staring at the ceiling with all this noise and confusion around me when I heard a distant bagpipe. There was a PA speaker that I could hear on the ceiling, and I was curious, and even a little amused as to the source and reason for bagpipe music in the rooms of the intensive care unit. In fact, I first described the man that I saw as a traveler. As the music filled the room faded away, and I was standing fit and strong on the top of a small hill within a landscape of rolling hills. I was looking down the slope of the hill over a broad meadow where a small man wearing kilts was walking away from me playing bagpipes and singing. I never saw his face, and he never stopped walking. As mentioned, this happened virtually the same way 10 times. Edna said, I then went down a blue flume-like tube with a bright light at the bottom. As I was floating through this tube, I could hear snippets of conversation from my past. On exiting the tube, I was surrounded by the most wonderful music, similar to panpipes. This music was everywhere, and the feeling was so peaceful and pain-free. I asked, "Where am I?" and was told the halls of music. Erwin V. said, "After that, I went into a long, dark tunnel where I could see a small light at the end, where arms and hands came out of the wall, trying to grab me and pulling me back. I floated towards a very clear, bright light, but not blinding light, but somehow never reached it totally. During that, I heard the most heavenly music played ever."
And sometimes they describe it as a windy tunnel, right?
Yeah, winds often encountered in the tunnel too. Moses said, "The cold continued and a very intense and dazzling yellow light appeared, along with a strong wind and a loud noise of wind. I started to enter this light tunnel." Bo B said, "I was floating in a sheer blue sky. A cold wind hit my limbs. I heard the sound of the wind upon me. I was transported. My arms and legs opened up like a cross. I was flying at such a speed towards this light. At the moment, I didn't realize what happened, but it was impressive. Maybe I was in a big tunnel." Heather S. said, "Wind, a calm wind, and a tone."
Wow. And the following shows some magnetic and electrical attraction to the light. Near-death experiencers can feel and see other beings, shapes and forms, and even motion.
Yeah, it's a heightened sense of awareness where they feel things are connected. I think this has to do with the plasma, or more fluid type of medium in the astral plane. Other effects perceived in the tunnel include magnetism and electricity. And here are some comments about the magnetism. Amelia F. said, "It felt like I was being dragged through a dark, wide tunnel high up, far away by some strong force like a magnetic field." And Cecile said, "A tunnel with light which drew me on. The light was strong and drew me towards it like a magnet." Suzanne B. said, "Magnetic-like forces were pulling me towards this light. As I drew closer, I discerned that what I thought were rays of light were actually other beings like myself. We were being pulled toward the vibrant light at the end of the tunnel and held in a state of suspended animation. I felt like a floating sensation as the light drew towards it. The closer I got, the better I felt." And Andrew P. said, "For some unknown reason, this dramatic rush toward the light causes me no concern. I have no fear of the light. I'm pulled closer and closer as if I'm drawn into the light by a gentle giant magnet."
Yeah, so they're electrically attracted to the light.
Yeah, here are some comments about the electricity. Chris B. said, "Suddenly I felt as if I was in a bright light. It was tinged with blue and silver, like a plasma ball you see in sci-fi movies. There was an electricity through the ether. There was a loud chirp, like air being blown out of a balloon. Suddenly, a white, all-encompassing light, white and bright as anything I could describe, but not painful to the eyes." Bill V. said, "I was not in human form. I was pure energy, and I was drawn to a huge white and golden light that seemed to encompass the whole universe. It began to draw me towards it, and as it did, it was like an experience of what people call the eye of the storm, a device that has a static electric field that when you touch the glass, the static electricity is drawn to your fingers."
So telepathic mind speak and crystal structures have been experienced too during the NDEs, right?
Yes, telepathic communication is one of the universal elements reported in the NDEs, and I should have mentioned that in the section on the being of light, as it is a prominent feature. A crystal city is sometimes mentioned, or crystal structures like buildings, a crystal tower and dome. It makes me wonder if there isn't some kind of tuning fork effect involved for resonance, and also crystals used on Earth for transducers and receivers. Julian D. said, "It was a place, a domain that I knew right away was a transfer station, a place where beings go when moving between realms. It was like a city of crystal structures and verdant green trees and vegetation. I went into a huge beyond comprehension, perhaps dome-like structure where one would go to meet with enormous beings of light, energy, color to do the life review." Bonnie M. said, "I was then shown many wondrous things of crystal light buildings, full of prisms of light, as we went to another pyramid tower, and there I was shown things I'm not to speak of." Vinny B. said, "To my left, about halfway across the bridge, was a large city made of light. The colors were silver blue, white, and silver. It looked like crystal light. I was getting better as we approached the end of the bridge and entered into a large white dome at the end of the bridge. I sat there as my two personal or guardian angels communicated with the others seated on the circumference of the interior of the dome." And here's an excerpt from a book on spiritism. It says, quote, "High above the radiant sanctuary rose a translucent tower made of a solid, transparent substance similar to crystal." And Christiane said, upon my arrival at this crystal-powered city I call Palaranja, the city of celestial light, where I was introduced to Mind Speak. Mind Speak is a communication without using words. End quote.
Wow. Looks like, seems like Atlantis or something. Next, the NDErs have perceived the light as God and also Jesus, angels, archangels, and guides.
Yeah, the light is often said or perceived to be God, and yes, Jesus, angels, archangels, and guides are also seen. I'll give a breakdown as to how many of each are seen in just a bit. Leonard said, this light loved me. This light talked to me. I asked if it was God, and it answered, yes, I am the light. David said, the light itself spoke to me, and I knew it was God, the power that created the whole universe. Tom S. said, I was suddenly in front of a great light. It had to have been God. Celine said, she told me that God was not someone we could meet. We wouldn't bear the vision, but he is an energy that we can feel and see as a light of variable intensity depending on one's heart's purity. Kathy W. said, God is love. The love was like an energy that connected every molecule in the universe. Tanja B. said, I asked the energy ball if it was God. They said, that is a human word, but if it makes you feel comfortable, you may call us God. Cricket said, but now I was standing on the floor of the hall, looking toward the far end of it. Well, God was there, or more accurately, a great fire or light that I was to understand represented or stood for God. Jesus is often seen in the light. There are dozens of accounts involving Jesus, not hundreds. While reading through some of the near-death experiences mentioning Jesus, I noticed several contradictions. This is ironic since NDErs claim to have such complete and total knowledge. A few said Jesus had brown hair, while a couple said he had white hair. A few said he had blue eyes, while a few said he had brown eyes. And a couple identified Jesus and God as the same identity, while others clearly thought of him as a different person. One said Jesus died on the cross, and another said he didn't. Here's a few examples. Patsy said, I knew that Christ had not died on the cross and that there was no sin or evil. Vinnie G said, he transferred me to a time during the crucifixion. I remember being in the crowd yelling for him to be crucified. I could smell the blood and I could smell death. I remember as he hung on the cross, I remember stabbing him with my spear. Sarah W. said, there before me was the most beautiful man I've ever seen in my whole life. The look on his face was pure love and excitement. I've never ever had anyone look at me like that. His eyes wide with excitement and overflowing with love and joy. The bluest blue I have seen in my life. He was young and tall, dark, and the most handsomest man alive. There was no living person to ever exist that could match the beauty of Jesus Christ. Julie H. said, I said, you're Jesus, aren't you? He gave me that smile that only Jesus can give, and I knew the answer without him having to say anything. I caught a glimpse of his eyes, which he allowed me to do. They are the most beautiful color I had even seen. They are light brown with flecks of amber color that shines with love. Marilyn R. said, suddenly I felt someone pick me up in their arms, and I was surrounded by light. I looked in the smiling face of the man who said his name was Jesus. He told me not to be frightened. He was here to take me back. He had a shoulder-length brown hair and dark brown eyes. Sybil S. said, I stood there and suddenly I saw Jesus. It was quite an awesome shock to be standing in his presence. I was in such awe I could not speak. My eyes were fixed upon him. His hair was white like wool and hung down to his shoulders. His skin was like brass without one wrinkle. His eyes were like flames of fire, and when he spoke, it was with great authority. End quote.
It would have been great to see if these witnesses or NDErs actually believed in Jesus or worshipped him during their life, right?
Yeah, there does seem to be a lot of expectation that is factored into it all, but there are people who are atheists that have experiences that included, angels and all this, so it doesn't always follow that line. In addition to the many cases of meeting Jesus, there are almost 100 cases where an archangel, a biblical figure such as the Virgin Mary, or a guardian angel or spirit guide was encountered. It doesn't include all the cases where an unidentified angel was seen. Here's the breakdown. Michael, there were 7 cases. Gabriel, 3 cases. Raphael, 3 cases. Metatron, 2 cases. The angel of death, 2 cases. An unnamed archangel, 3 cases. The Virgin Mary, 21 cases. Ascended Master, 2 cases. Spirit Guide, 12 cases. Guardian Angel, about 50 cases.
And they do describe sometimes the face of God.
That's right. I was curious to know how NDErs describe the face of God, so I searched the NDER website for the word face. Many NDErs do see faces of dead relatives or angels or even sometimes Jesus, since they saw the color of his eyes and hair. But when it comes to the face of the light being, which they almost unanimously call God, for some reason they cannot see his face because it is too bright to see details. Only a few can recall his face, and amazingly enough, a couple seem to see the face of a lion. It's pretty amazing because the Gnostic texts describe the false god, the demiurge, as having the face of a lion and the body of a serpent. While Jeff Long was being interviewed by Art Bell, a caller even called in and said they saw a being with a lion's face in the light during their NDE. Here are a few NDE descriptions from NDErs of NDErs wanting to see the face of God and a few that saw other faces. Charles said, I observed him as he was so surely to hold onto the doorknob of this particular room door as he came out backwards, and noticed his countenance having what appeared to be a long robe on, which you could clearly look through him, and the gold belt he had on, plus looking at his face, which scared the living crap out of me. He had the face of a lion. Patricia said, I looked at the throne and I was light, in the face of a bear, eagle, lion, and ram, all changing every second. When I looked to my right, I saw a dark brown man with a black pinstripe suit and a red tie. His eyes were snake eyes and blinked sideways. He had royal teeth like piranha, and he had two people with him, a woman and a man who looked similar. The tall, kind man who I knew was Jesus told me with his eyes that everything was going to be okay. John S. said, back to the pearly gates. He came to me, I said, hey man, you got wings. He smiled at me. I asked him what was pinning me and that it was really tough. He told me not to look at it, but I did for a second. I had to turn away. He was fearsome, had a few faces, some kind of lion, eagle, and such. My feeling was that it was the guard to the entrance of heaven. That caller to the Art Bell show said he was at the pearly gates. Jack, who had a ketamine experience, said, I sensed a presence to the rear right of me, and I could see a winged creature with a dragon/lion-like face similar to those seen in Asian art and architecture. It was flying around, coming close to me in the void I was floating in.
Quite a wide array of faces and appearances. God sitting on a throne is seen in a real power trip, it seems, right?
Yeah, lots of NDErs where God is sitting on a throne in a white room. I wonder if this chair can somehow radiate light and love. Why would a light being that can take any form at once need to sit on a throne or even sit at all? Does he get tired from standing too long or something? Seems a bit of a power trip. A throne is associated on earth with royalty and rulers of authority. It seems to me to be a way to convince us that we are subordinate to it and should yield to its suggestions and authority or power, form of mind control or spell casting, getting one to bend or yield and give away one's free will. The newly departed soul, which has been mired so long in the muck and lower vibrations, has forgotten its true nature and is somehow impressed by the size and brightness of the light and perceived feeling of love, which may just be mirroring back the same frequency of the soul, so that it's in resonance with the being and everything and everyone around it. SJ said, I found myself suddenly very high up in a bright white room. There were several beings there. There was a being on a throne that I was almost directly in front of. That was the only one sitting down. The other ones were standing up, and they were barefoot and in robes. I couldn't see their faces, just their feet and the bottoms of their robes. The standing ones seemed a bit irritated, and one lifted his ankle a bit as if to hide from me. They wanted to move off to the side so I couldn't see them. I was forced on my hands and knees and couldn't move or look around except with my eyes. They were very white or chalky looking. First, I believed from their color that they were possibly the gray aliens. Then I believed they were gods or religious type beings because of the setup of there being a throne in the room. The room was very bright white and they were wearing robes. Do not necessarily view this being on the throne as the big G God, who I feel is probably a different sort of abstract and a more universal non-human consciousness. However, I did feel the beings I was seeing have historically been called gods by other humans. Diane C. said, when taken to the throne room, I saw the reflection of God's light, not the full force of it. Like light glancing off of a window or mirror, but not the fullness of him. I did see light within the waters, grass, trees, etc., but it was like loving light embracing or throwing back to me pure love. Ron K. said, the image of God in human form sitting on a throne is a false idol of the same ilk as the golden calf. A long white beard and all the other physical images we create to describe God are simply reference points. Why would a being who can shape the universe with his thoughts need such simple tools as hands? The only way we can create is with our hands, so we imagine God with hands. What man is doing in all of these idols is creating an image to which man can personally relate. Could it be that the confusion and strife over the nature of God is caused by syntax, translations, and interpretations? End quote.
There's a feeling of love and a mysterious force triggering it all. Can you describe this force that's triggering it all?
Yeah, sometimes there's a mysterious force that is mentioned and associated with the love. Words often fail when it comes to describing it with earthly words as it's ineffable. I mean, NDErs grasp for words like orgasmic, etc. DW says the power of love created and sent out by that being was a force, like electricity is a force. I could feel it being sent out and touching everything around it. Raphael EH said, that force that pulled me felt like a light that enveloped me. JH said, I became aware of an intense, pure softness, and I knew in that moment, it's coming. I experienced the force of being wanted, but it wasn't a force with a vector, it was just an energy. But I resisted it. It was overwhelmingly attractive, and its attractiveness was the force that was pulling me towards it. Graciela H. said, my body began to elevate and elevate. I can say taken by a strange force. It was great. This strange force was elevating my body faster. Yvette R. said, suddenly I was violently sucked in by an uncontrollable force.
And there's also a feeling of love, like love being manifested during the NDEs, right?
Yeah, that's the most common attribute of the NDE. The most often reported association with light is the overwhelming feeling of love felt while it's in its presence. This may well be the case, but I have spoken to those who didn't even go into the tunnel or enter the light, and they told me they felt the intense love too. Maybe it's the natural state of our soul free from the physical body, which is yoked to an animal brain and counterfeit spirit. But Nicole BD said, the most amazing part was a pure feeling of the most intense love I can barely describe. It was just wave after wave of pure love. It was within me, it was around me, it was everything. It felt like heartbeats of love, one wave of love after another. If there was love in the interim as well, then the wave would come with even more and more. It was endless, eternal, and complete. I had no fear whatsoever. I had no feeling other than love. I had no thought other than reaching the light. I felt pure happiness and joy. It was the most beautiful feeling that words could never even come close to describing. Lloyd P. said, this light presence of pure unconditional love seemed to be in me and around me, all pervasive, extending into infinity. And strangely, there seemed to be no difference between it and my light being. And even more bewildering was that this conscious loving presence seemed to be not just my nature and substance, but that it was the nature and substance of all existence. SW said, from out of the corner of my left eye, I saw a spark of white light come from behind me. I turned around in the direction that the spark of light came from and saw a portal of sparkling white light and the feeling of unconditional love coming from the portal. I flew through that portal so fast as if my britches were on fire. I was home in the unconditional loving white light that renewed my spirit. End quote.
Wow, portals. NDEs and suffering. It seems like pain and suffering are the major component also to the afterlife in regards to life on Earth. All this suffering is useless for learning on Earth, which is a false reality where we're being sacrificed to experience ongoing pain during our separation from the source. Is that what life is all about here?
Suffering is such a central component to life on Earth, so I wanted to see what near-death experiencers said about suffering. Some imply it's necessary for learning and growing, but I'd like to think there would be a better tool for teaching souls about love. I think suffering is our soul's recognition that something is wrong and not the way it should be. Ron Kay said, the Buddha was right. Life is about suffering. While alive, we are captors, chained by the pains and pleasures of our neurons. As long as we pursue sensory pleasure, we must endure pain. Juliana D. said, I told her everything that had led me to committing suicide. She looked at me and said, God made you for a purpose. Trust me, I know this. I looked at her and said, do I really have to suffer though? Doesn't God love everyone enough to keep us from suffering so bad? She looked at me and said, God works in many ways. Trust me, I've seen it happen. She knew that she hadn't convinced me. Marc H. said, I understood that the pain and suffering I was going through was nothing more than life in this world for a greater purpose. Michael L. said, we must suffer and offer that suffering as a sacrifice to God. Charmaine,
that's a pretty important quote there, Michael L. We must
exactly.
suffer and offer that suffering as a sacrifice to God. So God is hungry, greedy for suffering, basically. So,
I don't know what context they use the word sacrifice. Maybe it's their religious
right.
upbringing kicking in. But Charmaine M said, I was told why are we here and why we suffer. I was told that we all have to live out lessons on earth for our soul to grow, like being a child learning new things. We suffer to learn how to cope with things and to develop our soul. Steve B said, time and again we choose to visit a living mechanical world that was designed and created in purposely for the evolution of the soul, essence, spirit energy, or whatever term you prefer. In a paradoxical sort of way, you could say that anger, hatred, greed, jealousy, as well as all other forms of human suffering were designed to exist in this world exclusively for our benefit because they do not exist back home. William T. said, when you are no longer a self, you no longer suffer. There's nothing to suffer over. When there is no voice in your head, there is no self to suffer about. Pain exists, but it's just as a detached element of reality that is impermanent as everything else. Scott W. said, she looked at me and said, we suffer for how long, for how we are being here. When we separate our being or spirit from the one truth and created a false reality, we feel pain. We separate our connection to this power. Our pain is directly proportionate to the level of separation of our spirit from here.
Well, next you'll be reporting the feeling of oneness, interconnectedness in the universe and the collective soul groups, right?
Yeah, a major component of the NDE seems to be a feeling of interconnectedness with everything or oneness with the universe. Some mention being part of a collective soul. This feeling of oneness is sometimes reported here on Earth with certain psychotropic drugs like mushroom or LSD, ecstasy. Jean said, I knew that what I'd found was the sum total of all knowing or wisdom of all people for all time, past, present, and future. All wisdom comes from this pool of collective knowing, and all we learn goes into the pool for the use of everyone. Brian G. said, I thought of the light more as a collective soul. NEP said, we are a collective soul group experiencing the balancing of duality. Alan D. McD said, somehow over the years I've mentally downloaded into my brain and understanding much of this mysterious knowledge direct from what I call the universal superconsciousness. This consciousness is a conglomerate of wisdom and knowledge of all sentient beings in our physical universe, also known as the collective unconsciousness, sort of cosmic internet if you like. Note, it's most definitely not Almighty God, who is the only infinite and eternal one. JMH said, I started wondering where I was and looked outside my light pod, which had no inside or outside, but for sake of description, I will say pod. And I saw others just exactly like me in a great light pod in the center of all of us, millions of us, floating in the otherwise dark void with the pure golden light connecting each of us to the center pod. The golden thread of light was like an umbilical cord, although it had no real form, but just light, and it was delivering the peace and love of the center being. The center being was so beautiful I could gaze on it forever, although I had no eyes. I was happy and totally contented. I remember thinking there were other light pods closer than me, and others way out beyond me a long ways, but I felt I was exactly where I belonged, and it was perfect. Fred B. said, I could see and feel the energy of the universe, understand the living connection between all of our multiple entities. I would see myself existing in a matrix-like laboratory connected to a computer and generating multiple copies of my own self through many different realities. This NDEer named Israel says that an angel named Lambiel explained to him the evolution of our planet, and that this wonderful evolution means all humans are going to be bound within some super being, the being who's the hateful God of the Old Testament. He said, I was excited. Who is that giant spirit? I felt as if my heart were racing, although I was in my astral body. The angel smiled and slowly answered my question. It is going to be a strong, huge, high-intensity spirit from the third level of existence, from the forces level. That spirit is going to bond himself with all of humanity on the planet Earth. It will create a huge new entity, one that will improve your lives tremendously and forever. This huge spirit is quite well known to humanity on Earth. Many people unknowingly already are craving to bond with him. They consciously pray for his health and love him. In some part of their subconscious minds, all people on Earth already know it. And whether they believe in any established religion or not, in times of great need, most humans recognize his existence. They call him God, Elohim, Yahweh, Allah, the Heavenly Father, and many other names. Here's one account from Mary D, which was labeled a spiritually transformative experience, but had all the elements of a standard NDE. She was asked, what emotions did you feel during the experience? She said, immense love. I saw a beam of light. It came out of the sky and touched me on the shoulder. She said, one responding to my unasked question, who are you? Said, God of Abraham, end quote.
And it seems that they describe the light erasing our knowledge upon our comeback to Earth is like some type of neuralizer for Men in Black, right?
Yeah, near-death experiencers say we come back to learn more, to gain more knowledge. They claim all knowledge of everything in the universe is present or available in the light, but lose that knowledge, much of it, when returning to Earth. It was lost during the fall in consciousness. Some say coming to Earth is to obtain wisdom through knowledge. Well, look at what NDErs have to say about both knowledge and wisdom in the light. Are we to believe our souls were created as blank slates or something, or that they were created incomplete, flawed, or defective, and the only way to gain wisdom is by incarnating here? I think that's a bit preposterous. Barbara S. said, the light then told me you're here to learn how to love and to gain knowledge. When I was told this, all the implications of the word love and knowledge were imparted to me. With the word love, it wasn't just about physical love, but the love of nature, accepting all people as the same, everything that pertained to love. The same was with knowledge. It wasn't just about book knowledge, but about learning about different cultures, histories of the world, etc. I felt when I was told this that it wasn't just my reason for being on Earth, but all our reason for being here, mankind. Kelly K said, along with this, I had gained universal knowledge of all things. Beverly B said, I was given more than just the answers to my questions. All knowledge unfolded to me like the instant blossoming of an infinite number of flowers all at once. Carol V said, I experienced light beings who were knowledge and gave me answers to all the questions of the universe, universal truth and knowledge. Daniel A said, while I was there and only there, access was given to knowledge. Everything that ever was, is, and will be. William E said, I had a feeling that I knew the answers to all life's questions, but upon returning to this world, that knowledge was taken from me. And Chantel L said, all the knowledge of the universe was inside my being.
So basically, we are all knowledgeable about everything until we come back here, or until we come here. Merging with the light seems to be an uncontrollable desire for NDErs at death. How and why do you think that is?
The topic of merging with the light is a very important one, as I have the feeling that at death, this being of light may be absorbing the light energy from the souls and sending the soul back to Earth into another body with just enough light energy to sustain itself. I think the desire to merge is due to the intense feelings of love felt and the indescribable attraction they have for the light. I think a lot of us yearn to be part of something bigger and more powerful than ourselves. The merging into one being calls into question the losing of one's soul or identity and conjures up thoughts of the Borg collective from Star Trek that have a hive mind. Some examples NDErs give of their desire to merge with the light. Justin Yu said, was going to merge with the light love seemed to be mostly about to, knew when I did I would cease to exist as I and become one and part of all. Ego would be gone totally. Never cross fully, seemed to choose without realizing it to come back as sadness and pain on earth and in death. Wanting to tell others about the reality of the light love so they would look for it too. And Karina said, my personal feeling is that we are all sparks that come from the big light. When our physical bodies die, our soul, spirit, essence, feelings, and thoughts go back to the source, the light. And Jill D said, what happened was that I became part of or returned to the presence that was so amazing. The closest analogy I can come up with is Odo in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, when he would go to his home planet and return to the collective. Only everything in the universe is part of this collective. In essence, the universe is the collective.
Now we've come to the most meaningful aspect of all this, the meaning of life, way beyond the Monty Python movie by the same name. Can NDEs provide us with real answers to the meaning of life? Big question.
Yeah, one of the biggest questions that mankind has probably asked the most throughout the course of history, to the point of it being cliche, is what is the meaning of life? Interestingly enough, NDErs do not unanimously agree on the answer, so I don't think they can provide a definitive answer, but can help provide insight. It may be possible that souls could have different purposes or missions during each lifetime, so the meaning of life could be different for each soul during any given life. And again, if we were just food for the archons, then the meaning of life from their perspective would be to provide ongoing illusions to allow them to keep feeding. The meaning of life for the true spirits would be to awaken from the dream state of these illusions, to end the game of this dramatic play, and return to the frequency level of our true home. Cam said, I did more research, and my vision of a spiral seemed to coincide with the samsara dharmic faith. All follow this. I went to my local Buddhist nun. She had an answer for everything and how the purpose of life was to escape the rebirth. This is exactly what I had seen. It was an awakening to the true meaning of life to escape the samsara. Mel W. said, I asked or thought, but what is the secret meaning of life? The answer was given as love, nothing more and nothing less. David J. said, I asked him what the meaning of life is. He told me for the entertainment of the spirit realm. Mala said, the sole purpose of my being here on earth is to learn how to maneuver and control my own powerful mind. I am educating myself in how my mind constantly creates my own reality and co-creates our reality, no matter where I reside, and I experience it. Mellon Thomas Benedict said, I asked the light, what is the plan? Said, there is no plan, there never was. You are given this universe to do what you want, and you're free to do that. The only meaning there is to life is the meaning you give it.
So basically, we're co-creators of our own lives. NDEs and spiritual evolution is a key issue too, right?
Yeah, it's the heart of the matter, no pun intended. But many near-death experiencers say that life is a school where we come to learn or grow or evolve as a soul. Make no mistake, this question of whether a soul needs to learn and is evolving is a key issue. As for knowledge, they say we need to come to Earth to learn, yet they say all knowledge is available there. We have 7 billion souls on the planet now. We have presumably been reincarnating here for thousands of years, and we still haven't learned enough about love. David O. said, on the way to the star, we passed all the planets in our solar system. I saw spirit life on each planet and was told each one was where different aspects of spirit evolution occurred. Joanne M. said, I remember visiting places that were just coming into existence and some that were on various planes of evolution. Roger C. said, the answer is thousands of planets having a higher evolution than you know on Earth. My third question, are there many planets with a lower evolution than Earth? Yes, thousands too. Muriel T. said, I was also told that the Earth serves and will continue to serve as a place of evolution and consciousness. Nancy D. said, I understood at the time that living in this manner was an evolutionary stage beyond that of light beings, whose lives we would perceive to be as discrete individual beings with spiritual bodies. At this stage of awareness, there was no beingness, only a mental or conscious existence. It became excruciatingly clear to me that the whole of our universe transpires exclusively within the mind of Source. There is only one being in our universe, Source. All things that we perceive as physical reality are really thoughts manifested by Source within its own energy field. And most importantly, none of it ever leaves the Source. So I intimately experience the knowing that I'm literally part of Source's thoughts, and the illusion that I am separate from it is a gift from Source to itself in order that Source might fully explore its own personality and creativity. Second, my level of consciousness continued to evolve through higher and more expansive levels until I was about to fully merge into Source/God. At that point, I felt as though I had the same level of consciousness as Source/God, which is the level of awareness, vibration necessary in order to merge directly into it. I did, however, evolve through numerous levels of awareness/consciousness, beingness, until I was no longer a being at all. B. said, in a mechanical world built to change, which is part of the design for the evolution of experience, a world consumed with growing hatred and violence, one that may seem void of love, at the conclusion of our experience, our true home awaits. Trisha S. said, there wasn't anything specific, simply the knowledge that I was trying to move on to the next step of evolution for my soul. Myra S. said, in each new lifetime, as the soul makes spiritual progress, its vibrational frequency gets tuned to a faster, higher, and finer level, depending upon its degree of evolution. The transformation continues until the frequency level is fine-tuned to such a degree that it connects with the frequency of the cosmos itself, which then allows it to gain entry into cosmic consciousness, one's true self, which is eternal bliss, otherwise known as Ananda. David A. said, it is far more likely that God is more like the Borg from Star Trek and that there is a collective consciousness, than energy beings that, when free of limiting physical constraints, are able to unite and become a part of the whole, as would a drop of water into the ocean. As energy, its properties would be consistent throughout the whole, as would its consciousness and knowledge. All the experiences of all the entities would be combined in a pool of knowledge that would be akin to one mind, one being, instantaneously. For God to be a single being would be like saying that the ocean is a single molecule of water, or that we're made up of a single cell instead of billions. Each of our cells contain the memory of who we are, and thus is able to reproduce, to grow, and maintain our bodies. It is not a far stretch of the imagination to say that God, as a collection of entities, also reproduces entities like we do ourselves. Therefore, we can deduce that God is growing and evolving. Likewise, destructive cells such as cancer will be consistent with the opposite of God, the devil, and that negative energy is harmful and destructive. This commonality is part of the model of the nature of the universe.
In some NDEs, Earth is presented as a school where we learn spiritual lessons.
Yeah, I have a friend at the near-death group meetings who says Earth is a school and each day I attend. To my way of thinking, maybe a school, but it could just as easily be a prison and a farm. Gina said, life is a school, nothing more. Daniel A. said, we're students at a school called Earth. When the bell rings, we go back home with lessons learned. Julio M. said, we can think of it as being in some kind of school or virtual game. Joni P. said, she said I was to stay there with her, and I asked her if this was school. She said it was something like a school, which made me happy as I wanted to go to school like my 3 older sisters. Mary W. said, by what I was shown, I understood that Earth is school, and when we are done, we have a life review, then we get to graduate and go back home. And Jean R. said, I was told that the Earth is like a big school, a place where you can apply spiritual lessons, learn, and test yourself under pressure to see if you can actually live what you already know you should do.
The light told NDErs that they had a mission on Earth.
Yes, near-death experiencers often say they were told they had to go back to Earth because they had a mission that they hadn't fulfilled yet. Yet the vast majority, maybe as much as 90% in my opinion, are never told what that mission is before they're sent back. Sometimes they are told they will know when the time is right or that they will receive help. It seems a little dubious to me that we are sent back, often against our will, to do an undisclosed mission. Gilliam DC said, this light told me without words that I still on a mission on Earth, but without saying what it was. Miguel RP said, this is when I was called and returned to the blue place in which I started, where the angel Gabriel said to me, Miguel, you have to go back. There's a mission for you to accomplish. Pascal said, I look back and see that entity, calm, faceless, with womanly ways, who tells me, wait, what are you doing? You can't decide yourself the time when you leave. You have a mission to fulfill. There's no way they will let you leave that world this way. You have to go back and do what you have to do. Never, did I answer, never shall I go back. You won't change my mind. Who are you to tell me what I have to do? What is this mission or purpose you're talking about? Just follow me, did she say insistently, but with a softness to which the most precious soap in this world does not compare. But what mission are you talking about? I don't understand anything to what you're saying. I don't want to go back there. This loneliness is too deep and agonizing. You're going to answer. Tell me what this mission is. Who are you? Who am I? A voice outmatching the meeting group instantly settled the matter. No one would even want it or thought of whispering or sighing. You'll understand in due time. No answer would content you. Let time act, be strong. Don't doubt, and you will know. Answers will be given in due time. It is up to you to capture them. Nothing is given for free to the knowledge keys keeper. End quote. Marta Y. said, the little that at this time I remember having understood includes the following. Like all other beings, you are living in order to accomplish the mission, and you are not doing this. You must change your way of living. You are supposed to help many other beings, and you are not doing so. You have to stop eating meat, as no one who eats meat can remain here. Sylvia R. said, she told me that my mission here upon the earth was not completed, and I'd have to go back, she informed me. I protested and begged to stay where she was, but to no avail. She did say I'd be allowed to stay the next time I came there. Not that I could or would stay, that she used the word allowed. Immediately after she had placed these things into my mind, I was sent back. And Pamela B said, the third time, I really didn't want to come back, and then my dad met me. He told me that he didn't raise a quitter, and that I needed to go back, and that I had a mission that most people would never be given the opportunity to be blessed with. At the same time, on this side, I heard a man that I love dearly tell me, please don't leave me. I heard him as plain as day. His voice was very clear. I chose to come back at that point. Pamela B.
Wow. So there seems to be a lot of NDEs mentioning the moon during their experience.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would say there's a lot, maybe 35 out of over
35.
4,000, which is a little less than 1%. And it's not usually mentioned in a prominent way, but some near-death experiencers did see the moon as part of their experience. The moon is mentioned more often in the context of out-of-body experiences. And KDW during her NDE said, then all of a sudden I was rapidly sucked into what I thought was this full moon. That night, the moon was a sliver, so this was the light that NDErs talk about. Ron A. said, I believe this was God, our creator of the universe, highest power. As I took a look around, I saw a bright light. It was the moon. The sun was reflecting light off the moon's surface. We were in space, equal distance to the moon on the right side. I do not think this was heaven's final destination. I think it was a greeting area to receive us when we crossed over. These next few experiences are from oberf.org, which contains over 3,000 out-of-body experiences. Luke B. said, I was in the moon and I went into a dark tunnel like I was in a rock, a little larger than my shoulders. I didn't feel gravity anymore. Joe W. said, I'm out of my body. Turning back to see the moon, not wanting to see myself for fear I might go back, and wanted to fully exploit the moment. I became aware that I was awake. I could think clearly for the first time ever. As the moon got bigger, I thought I'm going to float all the way to the moon. And what I can only describe as the Stargate experience, I was, for lack of a better word, flying through the galaxy. Lori E. had a spiritually transformative experience and said, to the left of the moon started a procession of alien beings, seemingly coming from the moon. They were dancing, literally dancing as they floated down to Earth. Instantly, I began to get information downloaded into my brain to remain calm. We were not under attack, that we were all friends and not to run or cause harm or mayhem. I was told that everyone else in the world was receiving the exact same information at the exact same time. I didn't feel panicked. I didn't feel scared. I was completely immersed in what was going on. Thousands and thousands of these beings were floating down to the ground around me. They looked like human beings, although they all had dark hair and they were quite slender and taller than humans. Each being had an aura of light around them. It was sparkling and almost made them look a bit translucent. The beings kept coming, gliding down to Earth. The music which had been entering my ears was layered with sound. It was encoded with additional information to assist us all in knowing this was part of a divine plan. And Meg described her NDE on a forum. She said, I had one in 1980. It's not exactly a tunnel. Imagine you walk up the staircase from the cellar and it's absolutely dark. On top of the stairs is a door that is tiny slit open. Through the slit and the gaps around the door and the hinges, the light is shining and creating the picture of a tunnel. But it's rather like an optical thing where the light rays create the illusion of a tunnel. A bit similar are pictures from eclipses. It's not a tube tunnel, it's an eclipse. End quote.
Some say the moon is artificial and a control tool or a control tower for the Matrix Archons. Is there a similar case with the sun and the NDEs?
I think one could make a case for that. After all, the sun is what gives us our life here in the physical realm, since it provides the energy, the Earth with energy. Without the sun, we would not be living here on Earth, so it's an enabler. It's like a frequency generator throwing out gamma waves. Could the intensely bright light that NDErs are drawn to actually be the sun? And before you immediately dismiss that as a possibility, consider that our souls do not look like our physical bodies and resemble more like a sphere of translucent light. Also, our sun is actually white light, but the intensity of its light and color can be diluted or changed due to the refraction of the rays through the Earth's atmosphere. Also consider the light could be the essence or soul of our sun. A large number of near-death experiencers do compare the light to the sun. There are quite a few near-death experiencers who say that we do go to the sun. Marta N. said, all of a sudden, and I looked up, I saw light. Now, I don't know if it was the spiritual flame or the sun. Maria TK said, then the light came. I was thrown straight into the middle of the sun, straight into the middle of the warmest, most beautiful, most welcoming light, where I instantly felt that here I feel good. I was drawn to the ocean of light as a gigantic magnet and drowned in light. The light was exactly like the center of the sun. Joe D said, I was being taken to a sun behind our sun where dwells the light of Alpha and Omega. It was extremely painful climbing this white ladder, but when I finally reached the brilliant white light of that sun, after about 18 hours of intense battling, I saw the brilliance of a God unnamed. Lynn M. was asked, did you see a light? Before I actually got out further into the cosmos, I sensed going through a massive light energy. I think now it was our sun. Christopher said, I'm sorry. Here are a few I found at oberf.org, which contains over 3,000 out-of-body experiences, reflective experiences other than NDE. Christopher said, suddenly I came to profound awareness that this sun was God. I believe that this sun, intelligence, God, wasn't a single being, but is the center of all beings. That is me, you, and perhaps all conscious beings. Jeffrey said, the higher I expand, the more ecstasy and warmth are registered by my consciousness. I am struck with a question as to where I am being taken to, and a thought comes to me that I am being pulled to the sun, not merely the surface sun, but the sun behind the sun. Whoa, I think, I'm going to God. Here's a spiritually transformative experience from Christian P. He says, I'm watching and suddenly I realize that in front of me there is an immense sun aspiring my glass sphere. Impossible to avoid it. I feel the irresistible attraction of the sun. I'm transmitting my fear to cease existing, that if our course is not taking another direction, we will be colliding with the sun. Then I'm convinced, deeply convinced, and I know that death doesn't exist. We continue the journey towards the sun that is aspiring my bubble. The sun is approaching, and when it's crossing my bubble, I'm enveloped in an orange-red light. I see the fire at the surface of the sun, and this is light, and this light is love without a word, without the possibility to describe its intensity, its strength, its power. Here's an STE of Kurt G. He said, I then proceeded to what appeared to be my residence, the center of a sun or some other great ball of light. Inside was like a room with some type of screen for viewing events in my life and every other life I've lived. From here I could view any past experience from any of my millions of existences and actually relive the scenario at the same time and location of the original event. I then came to a place that seemed to be where souls were created. There were millions of pods of light, almost egg-like, somewhat transparent and quite bright. Inside were two beings or souls, as far as I could tell, and from underneath these orbs were beams of light shining downward to nowhere in particular. It was more like the cone of light a flashlight might emit. Occasionally from these orbs, the smaller orb would appear and travel downward inside the beam of light, off to an unknown location. I knew this to be new souls being born. Scott T. had an out-of-body experience and said, quite simply, while one is floating, surrounding in the darkness and volume of space, the NDE reports of seeking the light, or I followed the light, seemed as appropriate a thing to try as any. So from space, there is one very big light to draw your attention, the sun. Now, technically, the sun is physically a gravitational ball of rawing nuclear fusion of no apparent intelligence, or it should be at least. The sun is not just this, though. It's such a thing in its physical appearance, but it has a non-physical aspect as well. From the orbital home point, cueing the light will cause you to start to fly towards the sun, the light. From this non-physical limitation-free perspective, you rapidly exceed the speed of the physical light, at which point something remarkable occurs. The sun and the physics, including time, of the physical universe recedes. The sun becomes an enormous tunnel of streaming light surrounded in nebulous clouds. Because at the end of a biological life event, the non-physical intelligent packet returns to the source via a streaming tunnel of light from which it originated. This tunnel works like a two-way connection feed from the source to the multiverse and is the same tunnel described in the NDE events. These experiences also describe tunneling effects caused by super fast velocities attained during the motion of passage to the source, end quote. And I received this in an email from GV. It said, I broke through to the light, that loving and whole white light. It's above the sun. It's parent of our sun. Its name is Sirius. Instead, people are worshiping the sun, which is a taker. I believe sun is hell and holy evil. It's the evil eye. Everything is inverted. Saturn is just a huge router.
So even Dolores Cannon mentioned memories from her, one of her patients, I think, in one of her latest books before she passed away, that we were children of the sun, or we were coming from the sun, right?
Yeah, I almost mentioned that in the first interview. She also mentioned that it's a game or a movie or a play also, during her, she's a hypnotherapist and she takes science under hypnosis.
Right, right.
Yeah, she did mention that.
This is the part that will specifically resonate to the listeners who have been following me via the Project Camelot TV or my UFO events. NDEs and ETs and aliens. ET beings have been mentioned quite often during those NDEs. I have hosted a few contactees who have been NDE near-death experiencers as well. David Armstrong, who became a healer, Cassandra Von Zandt, a channeler, Ray Hernandez, who became obsessed with NDEs after his dog's NDE and healing experience by contact with a UFO, and several abductees cases I've studied, etc. So NDEs and aliens.
Yeah, many of your listeners will be interested in this section on aliens, I'm sure. I give many more examples in our first interview, which are not NDEs, but are better categorized as alien abductions. I found several dozen near-death experiences, which include aliens, sometimes gray aliens, I think there's about a dozen of gray aliens, other times worms or snakes. So one thing to keep in mind are the similarities between NDEs and many alien abduction accounts. I gave a few examples of this in the first interview. Prominent near-death researcher Kenneth Ring has written about the similarity between near-death experiences and alien abduction accounts, and UFO researcher Raymond Fowler has as well. Ruth said, I was taken to special entities who looked like usual grays, but they had lots of wrinkles on their faces. They called themselves the Council and said they were part of a group called Soul Recyclers, helping souls to reincarnate. Now, these are near-death experiences. As Jay said, I found myself very high up in a bright white room. There were several beings there. They were very white or chalky looking. At first, I believed from their color that they were possibly the gray aliens. John B. said, after a few seconds, I noticed a giant gray being descending at a 45-degree angle down towards me. As it got closer, it conveyed to me a feeling of love so strong I could not only sense it, but feel it too. It was the strongest feeling of emotion I've ever felt, even to this day. Eventually, it was face to face with me. It was probably the equivalent of being 7 or 8 feet tall. It didn't really have any defining physical characteristics such as eyes or a nose or mouth, but it did have an area that resembled a face. The light eventually surrounded us. From the epicenter of this light came the smaller being. It floated down and got into position behind me and out of sight. That's when the larger being said to me telepathically, there's nothing we can do, you have to go back. Lynn H. said, I just knew how the universe worked, that God could have been an alien. Jane Zinn said, I was taken to see a worm working controls of big cylinders that had every animal and people you could think of, and they were going down the cylinders from adults to babies. Fish also. I remember seeing all kinds of fish. As I was walking towards the worm, I heard a voice say, you go back and be a better man. I was told by many the light was the creator God, and the worm was an angel giving rebirth. Suzanne B. said, I met with beings that looked a lot like the drawings I've seen of aliens. Brian K. said, immediately upon leaving my body, there was darkness. Then I saw several humans that were floating. They told me not to go to the light. At the end of the tunnel was a man who asked about the life review. I saw spirits like shining lights of love, and I saw 12 beings that were not human. They had large heads and large eyes. They had no mouths that I saw or ears. Marnie said, then I heard this sound. It was far off, but at the same time it was inside my head. It sounded like insects buzzing, and it was very annoying and irritating. I experienced the vibrations and insect sounds again, but not the tunnel. This last NDE is not from NDErs Stories, but was an NDE reported by a woman named Shelley. She said, they took me to a room in the sky, and I say they because there were 6 of them there. There were 3 beings on the left and 3 beings on the right. They were dressed in heavy robes. They probably were 8 feet high, and I was very much aware that this was not angels. And it wasn't the Mother Mary, and it wasn't Jesus. These were extraterrestrial beings.
Wow, the following is gonna please David Icke. Some shape-shifting archons are described during NDEs.
Yeah, the light beings are able to shapeshift in some of the NDEs, and whether they are archons, I guess, remains to be determined, but I've called them that. Archons is the name the Gnostics gave to the false rulers of our reality, and David Icke has talked about them. I believe the archons are shape-shifting entities. And could these examples of NDEs be archons? And if so, are all NDE encounters with archons? It's possible if they have access to the Akashic records that they could simulate any person who's lived appear as them, and thus convince the soul to go back to earth. Andrew C. said, there was a query as to what religious form the divine communicator should take. My answer was Jesus Christ, and a part of the light formed into an image that made me feel comfortable. An inquiry to me as to which religious symbolic form I wanted the presence to appear in. A few options, then my image of Jesus Christ in a blue robe appeared. Kathy B. said, so the thoughts came into my head, what kind of form or shape would make me most comfortable? What do you mean? I thought back. Some required me to take the shape of a wise old man, others a woman, and still others an animal, all of different races, ages, sizes, or species. What about you? I thought without hesitation, human. With that, the light began to simultaneously separate into amazing rays of color and intensify into a more solid form. Robert B. said, I saw the light approach. I was enveloped by the light and an entity that was to prepare me for what I call my interview with the Supreme Being later in the light. This first being appeared to be the Virgin Mary. Only after asking, are you truly the Virgin Mary? It instantly manifested true identity. I was nearly paralyzed with fear until asking again, please, what has happened to me? What is going on here? He said, I was later told that I was there for 7 years and that each person would see only what they could understand when they came to see her. Some would see her as Jesus, some their fathers or moms, every imaginable deity as well. Nancy L. said, God has a male voice that was rather multidimensional, like surround sound. I don't think God has a gender, but God can choose how to appear to me. Hugo said, they seek you as if they were a good spirit, but they are not, because when they arrive near you, they assume a shape that is frightening. Tunnel without end, and in the distance it seems to be a blue light calling you for the good, but when you accept death, it controls you through your eyes. When they are near you, the tunnel becomes a sparkling red. Eco M said, I examined the ditch carefully, then as I looked onto the other side of the ditch, that's when shapes started to take form. I saw these black creatures that could shape shift from small to large and vice versa. This example is not from NDErs, but is from Howard Storm's book, My Descent into Death. They told him, we can appear to you in human form if you wish, or in any form you want, so you'll be comfortable with us. He said, no, you're more beautiful than anything I've ever seen.
Wow. And some shadow beings and shadow people have been described in near-death experiences as well.
Yeah, there are a fair number of near-death experiences where shadowy figures or shadow beings are seen. Some of these were the Grim Reaper, others were hooded beings. Sometimes the hooded beings wore robes like monks. August said, Tio said, before I was presented with the light presence, I first went through a period of seeing and feeling several strange shadows, kind of wrapping themselves around me and over me, suffocating almost, for I suspected that these shadow beings may have meant that I would not be able to go to God. August said, an unseen force in the form of a shadow very powerfully and swiftly pulled me back through blurred darkness to my body. Don Kay said, as he performed his healing ritual, I could see my cancer fighting him. They were these black things that looked a lot like squids with single sharp black fangs on the end of each tentacle. He was pulling them out of my tissue. Later on, he told me they were this black greasy substance. Then, as days went by, I started noticing a dark, shadowy thing down a lone alley or tunnel. I didn't know what it was at first. Then, as it came closer, the more selfish I felt. It was my ego. Trevor O. said, as I came to that conclusion, several hooded beings of an ethereal-looking, faded sepia color appeared. There were at least 3 or 4 of them on my left side, and I believe the same amount on my right. The beings stood around me, paused a bit, and then began to lift me up into a tunnel of light.
Wow, pretty freaky.
Yeah.
Do near-death experiences explain that reincarnation is a recycling process of souls?
I'd imagine most NDErs would say that reincarnation is for the purpose of learning and evolving. There are a few, however, who do mention it as a recycling process. Many near-death experiences do recall living multiple lives. This concept ties into reincarnation and the notion that we need to come here until we've learned enough lessons to graduate. Of course, it could also be that the entities are just feeding off our energy and convincing us we need to come back. Ruth said, I was taken to special entities who looked like the usual grays, but they had lots of wrinkles on their faces. They called themselves the council and said they were part of a group called soul recyclers, helping souls to reincarnate. Alec B. said, this experience just continued to help me follow my Hindu beliefs of reincarnation. All is recycled: water, oxygen, nitrogen, and souls. Camelot M. said, I felt alive on so many levels, and like I was about to recycle, so to speak. Donna said, I was aware that I had had lives previously and that there was sort of a script or outline of my life telling me how long I was to live. Rebecca N. said, she believes we have many lives that were recycled. And Sandra J. said, I don't believe in God at all, but I do believe in an afterlife, a recycled life.
From those NDErs accounts, coming back to Earth is something that's forced upon them, against their free will, it seems.
At least half of the experiencers say they were forced to come back against their will, and probably half of those who chose to come back were persuaded into choosing to do so after seeing images of their loved ones needing them. Thus, they have an attachment. The light also tells them they have a mission to perform first, or even asks them to do it as a favor. In many cases, the spirit's thoughts are redirected to Earth, and off they go. Here's some examples. Rena P. said, up to this day, I can't recall if after looking downwards, the decision to return was completely mine or forced to me by an inside voice that didn't belong. Barbara G. said, it was like being paroled from hell and then being forced to return. Geraldine said, it was not my choice. I was forced to go back. I did not want to. It was made by that main light source. Stephen R. said, they asked me if I wanted to stay with them or if I wanted to come back to Earth. Because everything there was so overwhelmingly wonderful and beautiful, I asked to stay with them. It wasn't until years later, after I realized what happened to me had a name, near-death experience, and that what happened to me was real, not a dream, and I remembered then that they sent me back against my will. And I was really mad. Why did they make me come back when I wanted to stay? I felt controlled. Why did they ask me if the decision wasn't really mine? Oh, I was so mad, Stephen R. said. So notice in this account here of Miguel R.P., how many different tactics and forms are used to convince the NDER to come back to Earth. He said, this is when I was called and returned to the blue place in which I started, for the angel Gabriel said to me, Miguel, you have to go back. There is a mission for you to accomplish. I said to him, no, brother, I'm not going back. I'm here now, and I'm not about to move from here. I'm not leaving. He said, I have a wife and children. I replied that I did not remember them, and he made a gesture with his hand, and a seated woman appeared on a kind of white chair, praying and weeping, holding my diary in her hand. I drew near, saw her, and said to the angel, now I remember her. She is my wife. He asked me if I wanted to see my children, and I said yes. With another gesture of his hands, he took me to a really poor district with unpaved streets and mud. I was taken near a bus stop where there were gray concrete storm drains. We came to a house under construction or unfinished. The floor was of earth, the walls had no covering, the bath also half finished, and on the patio there were two children playing, covered in mud. Following another gesture, I approached them and could see that, yes, I recognized them. They were my children. The angel said, you have to go back, to which I replied, no way. Now that I'm here, I'm not going back there. I said, what if the next time I don't end up in this place? Better to stay for good. No point getting here if I'm going to leave. At this point, I heard a strong, loud voice speaking in a very special way with love, affection, but also with authority, which said to me, Miguel, you must go back. I looked all around me, up, down, left, and right, but no one had spoken to me. Then I asked, who's speaking to me? And again, I heard this voice saying to me, I am the true and faithful witness. You have to go back. I said, Jesus? And he answered, yes, you must go back. I said, I'm ready, Lord. Thy will be done. End quote. This soul was told they were the only one that could do whatever it was that needed to be done. Why me? I said. This is R for R. He said, why me? I said. It said to me with a sad reply, you're the only one that I've found strong enough to deal with this pain. You share the same feelings that I have felt, the feeling of loneliness, the feeling of being not noticed. That's why I've chosen you. From here on out, you will never forget this moment, and others will never realize the true meaning of life. Only you will understand life, and only you can hold my existence. Stephen L. said, here's another person that was told no one else could do what needed to be done. Stephen L. said, I said, I'd like to stay. They said, maybe another time, but not now. You have a mission to do on the earth, and you must do it. No one else can do it but you. I thought about it and said, okay, I'll do it. The mission is basically to share my story down here on the earth, tell everybody that they are loved too. Carmel LB said, this person, he asked me if I would do a favor for them by carrying on the energy work I had been doing. I agreed. That person was asked if they could come back as a favor too. Nuka Arinda said, he told me, I want you to go back on earth. There's something I want you to do. After you will finish it, you will come back here in heaven and live here forever. I said, no, I want to stay here. He said, no, just go back. I said, no, I want to stay here. he spoke in a cool voice and convinced me to go back on Earth. Michael D said, I didn't seem to fully understand what she was telling me. I enjoyed the loving feeling she was giving me. I seemed to be decoding and understanding what she told me more as time goes by. I'll try to put into words what she told me. She told me that I was very special. She told me that I had a very important task to fulfill in this life. She said I would go through some hard and difficult lessons, but that I would come out okay. So, sometimes flattery is used, and they told her to have a very important mission.
Right. In NDEs, they talk about judgment and council of beings, just like on Earth, they're being judged. And I have a good friend of mine. She's a lady starseed in France called Miranda. And she remembers consciously in between lives as having been judged on a tribunal council on Saturn in between lives. Wow. So that's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it is. While the vast majority of NDErs say they judge themselves, but this is because of the life review where no judgment is given. But some do, however, say they were judged by God or a council, so there is a contradiction. And almost all NDErs say we have free will too, but many say they were sent back to Earth against their will, whether it's not their time yet or they have a mission to fulfill. So which is it? Keep in mind, most of the ones who say we judge ourselves were still persuaded to come back for the same reason. They are also sometimes told they have more to learn, and so they must come back. Isn't that a judgment? This also coincides with the in-between lives research of hypnotherapists such as Michael Newton and Dolores Cannon, who found that there was a council which eventually convinced the souls of the need to come back to Earth. At any rate, here are some near-death experiencers who said they were judged. Philip S. said, there was a royal figure who decided without my consent if I could stay with them or not. Patrice P. said, God judges us all. God chooses where we go. I had no choice in the matter. I was sent back. Attila P. said, I moved so I could quickly get to the light, but before I made to the door, one of the sentinels grabbed me and held me fast. The doors closed. Next, I found myself in some kind of courtroom. Before me sat an unbelievably stern, all-powerful, yet very kind judge, absolutely incorruptible. The judge stopped for a while and said, but you have a mission. I did not want to return to the hell that is the reality of being on Earth, but the judge determined in his objective way, you must go back. Gail A. said, then came a judgment of sorts where I was judged on the things I had done and the things I would do in my future life. This upset me as I felt it was mean to punish or judge me for things I hadn't done yet. I wasn't judged on big things, more small instances of intent. Then I was told I had to go back, which didn't make me happy at all, as I knew that being alive would hurt. Every aspect of living would hurt. I thought of going back into a wet, disgusting body repulsed me. I couldn't believe I had to wear my body again, as it felt like wearing an old, disgusting coat that belonged to someone else. Pico M. said, then all of a sudden a bright light appeared and I looked up towards it. In the midst of this light, there was a man smiling towards me. He appeared to be in front of a golden judge's bench that was huge. George W. said, I think I'm still stuck in the life review part sometimes. I need to forgive myself and move on. My grandfather was my judge in the experience, and he told me to come back and honor my father.
It wasn't George W. Bush, huh?
George W. David G. To my right were wooden stages like those in a courtroom in the movies. First had a gray face. The second looked normal, but the third was a luminous entity. I knew it was a person, but without the form of a person. It was a light and changed shape continuously. I deduced that they were judging me. The person seated between the other two on my right struck the table with a gavel while holding up some papers in the other hand. Then he said my name, and he is condemned to go on living. Pascal C. said, at that moment, I had the feeling to be in a court of justice, but instead of our dull judges, nameless, faceless, genderless light beings are just there around me. Deborah J. said, next thing I knew, I was standing in front of a council of 13 beings with the one in the middle twice as big as the 6 on either side of him. They were all sitting in chairs, big chairs at a sizable distance in front of me. I was naked and felt totally revealed and tried to use my hands to cover myself up. The questions they were asking me were about my life and how I had lived it. I got the feeling they were not pleased with me. I was terrified, to say the least, exposed to the hilt. I knew they knew it all. Towards the end of the deal, he told me they were not going to let me remember most of what happened, and they had decided they were going to send me back because you have to get it right. Michael F. said, however, several questions were asked by the members of the council asking me if I agreed to fulfill a promise of unknown nature they would allow me to return to this world. Closer to what was said would be that one day I'd be granted the ability to do something great. Marie W. said, behind me was a very tall angel who told me his name was Metatron. Metatron was my spiritual teacher. He explained in quite a bit of detail how mistakes can happen in a death. While this was happening, the masters and angels stayed outside of it and guided me. The masters who had me as their task had to get divine permission from the Council of Seven to intervene and alter my experience, and they considered that perhaps there was more they could do with me than just keep me on the other side and not allow them to return. We had to go to the council meeting. I was allowed to be in the room, but not allowed to speak or interfere in any way. They turned to me and told me that if I would agree to take on this new contract, that my healing would be greatly aided and accelerated for them if I would agree to the terms. And Frederick M. said, this council was led by my grandfather. There I was shown my past life. I had access to the purpose of my life. This council was organized only with the goal to come back to Earth. Then they started to show me the life of my children without me, and they showed me the life that I would be living when coming back to Earth. My children would be happier.
Hmm. They give them all kinds of reasons to come back.
Yeah.
It seems like you just described the false guides and artificial councils, various ascended masters or real fallen angels. I don't know whichever. NDEs show us there are soul contracts as well, right?
Yeah, soul contracts are a huge deal for the archons. They have no real power over us if we are sovereign beings. They would need to convince us and have us agree to come back. When this occurs, soul contracts are made. They should be null and void at death, and they would need to convince us to agree to a new contract. As sovereign beings, we may even be able to dissolve the contract here now. It's not binding since it was created with lies and deception. Chantel L. said, we ask to be born and we enter into a contract. We come to Earth with a purpose. Rachel E. said, yes, life can only exist if there's death. Without death, there can be no life. So we enter a contract with God. And the terms and conditions include difficulties, challenges, and definite hardships. That is the experience we all signed up for. Matt S. said, I was made aware that there were things that I had contracted to do that were still undone. Confirmation to me of reincarnation and contract incarnation. And then the man who I interviewed who experienced a demiurge, she said, imagine if you were a computer programmer and they have statements called if, then, else statements. Imagine that if there's this one plan they showed you, and if you do all of this, everything you dream of will come true. It'll be more or less painless. You'll walk through life and you'll be, the savior of the world, and yet you get to be the hero, No percentages, but what I saw was there were branches that went off to either side. If this happens, then this happens. And the if and then and then and then and then and then. Yeah, but I was looking at the thens. I'm going to do the thens, and then everything's going to work out great. In quote.
Right. NDEs show us sometimes some scenes from hell.
Yeah, I've heard as many as one of every 7 near-death experiences contain negative imagery or hellish depictions. When searching for hell on NDER, I only found about 1% who saw something which resembled hell, and they themselves were not being punished. The spirits there could leave anytime they wanted. It was more a prison of their own. Nicholas P. said, the light told me many things which I chose not to talk of, but I was told there is no hell. Hell is a lack of harmony. Heaven is harmony. Lorraine I. said, or they asked her, what emotions did you experience following your experience? She said, hell. I thought God hated me or else it wouldn't have happened. And the showing me my future was just a part of some sick, cruel game he was playing with me. Private Doubting said, at last, light is seen ahead. It is not the light of heaven. It is the lure of hell. Sarah said, the first doorway I peered into resembled a classic hell. There was a sound of shrieking and agonizing screams. Most of me wanted to leave so bad I had no difficulty. My feeling was that anyone could leave if they wished. I felt that no one or nothing had put those people in captivity except for their belief in the agony they continued to suffer. And then Karen F. said she laughed and told me there is no hell. We're all equal in spirit form. So,
near-death experiences show us a hypnotic spell and technology, some type of trance state, and some overwhelming induced euphoria. Isn't that the classic Stockholm syndrome?
yes, there are some NDEs which mention the hypnotic allure of the tunnel or eyes of the beings, and it could be as if we're put under some sort of spell or trance. And there's also the possibility of the Stockholm syndrome where captors fall in love with the captors fall in love with the captors. And here are a few mentioning a hypnotic trance. Peg A. said, A roaring noise began to escalate, and within an instant, I became aware of an intense bright light off in the distance. And I turned my focus toward its captivating dance. The light's prism of energy and illumination began to spiral and grow, and I immediately put forth all my senses into its hypnotic allure. I began to feel the most utterly peaceful, loving sensation, and I yearned to move toward and inhabit this light and the love it emanated. Michael F. said, the pull of this light is so captivating and overwhelming that I have no choice but to completely surrender to it. It reminded me of shimmering liquid mercury. The attraction I feel towards this light fills me with total awe. Christina said, I was watching those eyes and I could hear people talk, but it was as if in a trance gazing at that elderly man. Nora said, the light was hypnotic, persuading you to enter, but the feeling of love felt stronger. And Tina said, the one in the center had a hypnotic pull with his eyes. He was mocking me for something, like I'd lost a bet with him. And then there's the euphoria that's felt. It's similar to the feeling of euphoria that some drugs here can induce. And Jean J. said, perhaps it was a euphoric trance of some kind. It was as if a spirit had consumed my whole being. David W. said, a feeling of liberation opposite to death, or even a feeling of invulnerability. At the time, one has the impression of a little intoxicating to have won a fight against the grim reaper. Nothing else on earth can get to you, a feeling of like a light euphoria. And Joe D. said, I'm sure some sort of deal was forged that day, but instantaneously I was overcome with a euphoric feeling of what I can only describe as complete contentment.
Contentment and consent.
Yeah.
Do NDEs reveal to us the tricks, the traps, and anomalies inside the false projection of the afterlife, you think?
I think there are some cases which do reveal some of the tricks, traps, and anomalies, and here are a few cases which do. Let's see. Janet P. was asked, did you see a light? And she said, no. Beyond that, that's a false projection. Then I was alone, and far out in distance was a giant red blob. You know that movie, The Blob? That's what it looked like and what it was. I could see and explain it because I was full of eternal life, Jesus. But this blob thing I knew is all of creation, all mucked together, just wandering around. It consisted of all intermingled to the point of lost identities, all globbed together, just wandering aimlessly, looking for some kind of food to keep it going. But it wasn't going anywhere because the most worst part of it was its feeling of lifelessness. Private Doubting said, at last, light is seen ahead. It's not the light of heaven, it's the lit of hell. Peter said, the only thing that puts any doubt in my mind is that the possibility that Satan can simulate the love of God and lure people into deception. That's what people say anyway. So yeah, I was in two minds about it for a while. Noel Wynn said, there was a blue sky and some clouds floating and moving slowly in the sky that seemed quite low, and that seemed above all false, as if hiding something. I had the sensation that this place was used as a place of welcome for children or young people, and that this environment had been built to reassure and appease them. Linda G. said, he was thinking, this must be heaven, and I'm here because I've tried to be good to people. But then he started moving faster until the meadow was left behind him in a blur. He found himself out in the middle of the boulders, floating over a great expanse of blackness below. Then he knew that he had been tricked by Satan into thinking he was going to be in heaven. Francisca R. said, once again on the flower meadow, I said I would love so much to stay in heaven and asked if there wouldn't possibly exist a speedier process for me. Andreas promised to let me eventually decide myself. Of course, I knew that it was a trick. He would only let me decide when it would be clear that I wanted to remain on Earth. But nevertheless, it comforted me. Andrew P. said, the light has played a devious trick on me. The light allowed me to expand and become one with the universe, and then rammed me back into my frail earthly body. At the time, it seemed like a very cool experience to put me through. I was very angry at the light. Gunter W. said, suddenly I realized that the bright sun in front of me was a shining moon, and that the red sun had the moon safely under control, making in fact one sun. This was the message that the sun had wanted to get across. Then the being of light wanted to talk to me on a man-to-man basis. He placed me on top of a high mountain where I had to sit on a large piece of rock. I asked him why he wanted to destroy me, and he told me that there existed also evil but very powerful and cunning beings who were his enemies with whom he had been constantly fighting. He also told me that I had to warn my world against them, and I automatically nodded in agreement. He said that his enemies had wanted to play a trick on him by using me as a kind of trap, but he had to defend this world and the black one. Kyle L. said, experience was probably real. I do not know if it was real, if it was just a construct of my brain to ease me into death. and it could be an illusion or a trap. R.A. said, I initially believed that during this experience I had been in the presence of God, but over the years I had some real struggles, wondering about which being, God or Satan, had been its source. I cannot prove which one it was, but I do tend to believe that in this case it was God. Paul says, in near-death experience, Paul says, religions teach of a false God that is not the true God of the afterlife, but probably a demonic entity in itself who they pose as the true God. This is not God. This is the description of fear and darkness. God is not a demanding, bloodthirsty, bipolar control freak bent on balancing some sin balance sheet. Pressure does not originate from him. Pressure is fear-based, which originates from darkness. God is supreme and not a petty spy. He isn't a vigilant behavioral scientist accountant or a karma thought police with a penchant for revenge tantrums. And he's not represented by the two-faced liar strutting around a church house. What a racket. Can you imagine having this advantage in your personal life? If you don't do things my way, that means you're overtaken by a demon and you risk the wrath of an angry God who may then allow the devil to give you cancer, even though he wishes he didn't have to allow it. He simply has no choice. He forced his hand. How convenient for our rulers. Talk about a tormenting trap. This is spiritual enslavement that forces one to live in an altered state of consciousness as well as a spiritual cesspool of confusion. James S. said, I looked up at my benefactors and found that they were dressed in black gowns and had a screen over their faces, which if you look closely at had a mirror-like substance that reflected your own image back at you. Trish R. said, St. Gabriel was telling St. Peter that I had not read the Gospel of Marc yet. St. Gabriel was holding a huge open book I assumed to be a Bible, and they looked at it. It seemed as if Gabriel was convincing Peter I could not enter heaven yet. And then Gunther W. said, my whole soul or being was immersed in this love. He lifted me up and gave me a kiss on my mouth. This being of light loved me deeply, infinitely deeply, and more intensively. I was happy. I could have stayed in this beam of love forever. Gradually, the loving became weaker, and I felt that something was wrong with me, something that made it very difficult for the life to continue with his love. He was trying not to tell me why. Finally, however, he was not able to keep it up any longer, and he quickly said, you have a smelly breath, and you need a bath. I received the impression that I would have to take a bath similar to that I was used to on Earth, but by dipping the whole body. I thought to myself, this scoundrel of a voice, he has betrayed me by forcing me into this world. There's no way back. This is final.
It cost him a bath and an incarnation too. NDEs testify and reveal the contradictions or inconsistencies. Which one? Which ones?
Yeah, there are some noticeable contradictions in the overall body of NDE reports. Like I said before, some say Jesus had blue eyes, others brown. One said he had green eyes. Some say he had blonde hair, others white. One person said Jesus showed her the wounds in his hands, while another person said they learned Jesus did not die on the cross, and others say he did. Some say Jesus and God are the same person, while others said no. Some said there's no hell or evil, while others were shown hell and evil and say they know it exists. The vast majority say we judge ourselves, while others were clearly judged by a God or a council of beings, courtrooms. One person said they knew or learned there's no reincarnation, while others learned of multiple lives they had lived. Many say we have free will, yet many were literally forced to come back to Earth against their will. Others were shown specific events in the future of the Earth or their own lives. One said he was shown what would happen to his family members if he chose to come back, and also what would happen if he chose not to come back. If the future is known, do we really have total free will? EDF said, but when I got to the round circle at the end of the tunnel, where I would have entered into the light, I got a big surprise. Standing in the circle with legs apart and arms reaching out toward me was a very bright, multicolored figure, almost like a cartoon character and similar to the Joker on a deck of playing cards, but with a big smile that for some reason was more comforting and gentle than scary. He gently caught me in his arms and said to me, back to the womb, as he turned me around and gently tossed me back down the tunnel. Another fascinating experience was reported by Gary, who saw lots of technology in the place he went to, and that when he saw the movie The Matrix, he had to get up and leave because it was so eerily reminiscent of his NDE. He writes, people should be studying NDEs and finding out why we're trapped in these inferior bodies. On his form, he was asked the question, what can a national organization with an interest in near-death experience do that would be of interest to you? He pleaded, find out what is happening, end quote. So finally, this NDE is the anomaly of all anomalies. Fred B. had a series of NDEs while using ketamine. And each time he was able to see further into the experience, until he was able to see through the illusion and realized he was sitting in a moving chair and part of a cinema or theater production being cheered on, and the beings were calling him a cheater for using his methods. He says, quote, "In the 7+ experiences, I would come back to the same dark room, but I would be wheeled down the spiral corridor. There would be no humming or cheering. I would be sent down in a backstage area where people, staff, employees, would be ushering my body in an open space. I would hear the words cheater being pronounced by some of them. The 6th and final phase would then happen. I would be welcomed as a hero in the middle of a giant open-air stadium with approximately 90,000 spectators. Loud music would be playing while I was wheeled on stage. I remember then feeling totally immersed in the experience, as if my body on earth didn't exist anymore. People that I knew on earth, parents, friends, co-workers, would be waiting for me on stage. They would all be happy to see me again." So,
That's a hell of a stage.
like Truman Show, right?
Yeah, totally. And these show us that consciousness is creating reality. Is that the key to our freedom and free will?
The near-death experience does seem to be driven by consciousness, and the realization of that free will is the key to our freedom, because many are not using that power and instead are relying on an external source to dictate to them their reality. Some NDErs were indeed able to manifest or create their own reality, but it seems once one has gone through the tunnel and to the light, that ability gets surrendered or greatly diminished. Dwayne S. said, "As I was being shown how to manifest anything I wanted and that it would be instantly granted, I thought of a piece of my mother's chocolate cake. Instantly, my mom was there with me in heaven, handing me a piece of her heavenly chocolate cake." Juliet N. said, "I could move effortlessly and adapt to any environment I happen to be in at any given moment. I would simply think about something and it would instantly manifest. Or I'd think about a place and there I'd be. Oh, what a sensation to experience such power. Be anywhere I wanted to be and to create anything I wanted to, and to feel so totally free." Mala said, "A voice sounded. You create the world that you know. You have been given the most wonderful gift, the ability to project yourself outwards into a physical form." Scott W. said, "I heard words in different orders. Thoughts became imaginings, and imaginings became manifestations. I used the things he or it gave me in that place, and they were things most forget to use when they are bound. I was only a mind in that world, but a mind that could manifest desire. I saw that we have created false truths and realities because we loathe what we think is the truth. We have nearly, if not completely, ruined our lives, hearts, minds, and souls to keep feeding the illusions. We keep this false love and reality alive just to do it." Nancy D. said, "I realize that we all constantly manifest what we call physical reality just by virtue of our thoughts, and that the only reason we are fooled into believing it is real is because of the limitations of human senses. So I experimented with consciously manifesting some more to test its truth. I proved to myself that we do indeed have the ability to manifest what humans perceive to be physical reality by focusing our attention and intention on doing so." Marc H. said, "What your soul desired to see was filled at that very moment. Everything that your soul needed was met before it could be asked." Dwayne S. said, "As my orientation went on, they explained how on that celestial side of the veil, anything we desire is instantaneously provided. We just need to feel the desire." Lori E. said, "I understood that thoughts create forms." Patsy D. said, "I was in physical reality because it is time for the physical being to mature and accept their responsibility for their creation and to realize that they create their own reality." Mala said, "We are confronted by everything that we create. We are that powerful. I was shown that I am not yet fully able to control my negative emotions in a reality where ultimately everything happens in an instant. So I was sent back to continue my learning." Janine E. said, "I did not understand why my thoughts would manifest afterwards. Everything I would think of would appear, and it concerned me, so I made a promise to myself that I would keep positive thoughts and images because I learned that our thoughts are powerful, either negative or positive." And Ron K. said, he said, "The way I just described it may sound like non-existence to some, but it is the only true existence of grand and unspeakable peace, security, and understanding. The ego's perception of the world is a collectively reinforced illusion. To be without want or desire is not non-existence. It's a state in which all our wants and desires are fulfilled."
Wow. Okay. Intent is the key, it seems. Yeah, intention. coming back from NDEs, what is being mentioned regarding frequency and ascent about this drop in consciousness and cosmic amnesia? Because there's a cosmic amnesia at play.
Right. Essentially, everything is energy, which consists of higher and lower octaves of vibration or frequency. And this can be verified by the fact NDErs have trouble with electronics when they return to Earth. An indication that the soul's frequency increases in the astral realm as opposed to the lower density of the physical body here on Earth. The spirits trapped here on Earth have had their frequencies lowered tremendously, and this results in a drop in consciousness and awareness of cosmic amnesia, as you said. Rebecca M. said, we're at a different frequency when we're out of our body. Barry L. said, the spirit had a vibratory vibration to it which changed in its frequency. Greg S. said, spirit is within a realm that moves much faster than the physical plane and is set to a much higher frequency vibration and is of a much higher fidelity. Joseph C. said, I would conclude our spirits resonate at a higher frequency. And Scott W. said, I don't feel like I'm the one controlling me entirely anymore. The frequency was put into me, a resonance. I can't help but vibrate at that resonance now. There is a tremendous amount of pain associated with feeling and hearing these frequencies as well, because there are man-made frequency generators that compete and interfere on purpose with the frequencies of the Creator. Amy said, God was the mind or the order in all things, the supreme highest vibration and frequency in essence, around and in everything, all that is beautiful and peaceful and one, and all that is good. Myra said, in each new lifetime, as the soul makes spiritual progress, its vibrational frequency gets tuned to a faster, higher, and finer level, depending upon its degree of evolution. The transformation continues into the frequency levels, fine-tuned to such a degree that it connects with the frequency of the cosmos itself, which then allows it to gain entry into cosmic consciousness, one's true self, which is eternal bliss, Ananda. Rachel said, I started ascending. It seemed to be the most natural thing to ascend. Rob D. said, I was told we all go back many times until we have learned what is needed to ascend to a higher state of being. Marie W. said, they told me that I had earned the right to ascend. George B. said, I was sort of giddy with the knowledge that death was so easy and pleasant. That's how I was feeling at that time. That was just a matter of floating away. Hannah said, when we die, we become part of the matter of the universe and ascend into a higher state of consciousness. And here is David's NDE, where he toured 7 planes of heaven. This should give you an idea that there are higher planes than that first white light, and your goal is to go to the highest one possible. He said, in each ascending heaven, the glory of these qualities in the light multiplied another 1,000,000 times. Inconceivable how bright and beautiful life is in these heavens to any mind alone, separate from this light. I was taken to the point where ecstasy and love were so overwhelming, I could barely stand the levels of cosmic energy and ecstasy any longer. I was then taken into the 7th heaven. What happens there is so far beyond my abilities. God brought me down. I only lasted 10 seconds in the 7th heaven. To think that in each of these higher heavens was the light and glory of innocence, love, ecstasy, peace, power, beauty, grace, and wisdom multiplies 1,000,000 times over the preceding heaven, makes it so difficult to pass through and live in. And Terry R. said, I also came to an understanding that heaven isn't a place you are admitted to, but it is a frequency that you attain. Being in the presence of white light was heaven. It was more than the greatest feeling I'd ever experienced or dreamed was possible. Therefore, I knew that although it wasn't intended as punishment, I couldn't maintain that frequency that was allowing me to feel the bliss temporarily. I knew that somehow I had to raise my vibration and become more loving in order to experience this indescribably love on a permanent basis. Now my goal has become to feel nothing but unconditional love all the time. I still have to do a little work to shift my frequency to love, where I can feel the warmth of it in my heart on many occasions, but I do eventually get there. So now I work on getting there quicker and staying there longer without being pulled into the energy that creates the challenges of everyday life.
Wow. Do NDEs teach us that our ego's attachments to the material world is pushing us to return to Earth?
Yes. NDErs are in the state of orgasmic bliss, feel as if they could stay there for 1,000,000 years, but sometimes they're drawn back because of their attachments to the physical plane, usually a relative or loved one. The Tibetan Book of the Dead says, first of all, there will appear to you swifter than lightning, the luminous splendor of the colorless light of emptiness, and that will surround you on all sides. Try to submerge yourself in that light, giving up all belief in a separate self, all attachment to your illusory ego. It also mentions about avoiding the smoky white light of hell and entering the clear light. Anna L. said, but at that same time, something was calling me back. Someone was feeling fearful emotions. I didn't realize that these feelings were coming from me, from my own human feelings of attachment. But the light informed me that, in fact, the fear and attachment to the world were mine. Muhammad Z. said, some humans are so attached to their physical and material world that they still worry about their money, possessions, or power even after death. They don't notice their guide and might not even notice that they are dead. Their soul can stay earthbound for a long time after their death. I got this understanding that any strong earthbound attachment can keep our souls from soaring. Steve B. said, all the knowledge that I had gained, along with all the emotional energies and attachments that I had accumulated over my lifespan, both positive and negative, remained with me, and they kept me tied to this world. Matilda M. said, I feel that the ego gradually stretches, that the ties to this ego with its memory, its desires, its expectations just naturally vanish. And Shannon T. said, I thought briefly of everything and everyone I was leaving behind, but had no worries, care, or attachment to them anymore. I was in total bliss and awe that I was still alive but in another place. And Ricardo H. said, coming back feels like a rebirth, but now everything is different. Much of what once mattered to me now does not make sense. Both topics of interest and relationships with certain people were almost indispensable to me and with whom I'd had an attachment bond. Now I feel it no longer makes sense to even miss such relationships or such topics. What I experienced in the light of the cloud and the NDE is an absolute value to which everything else is worthless, that all human suffering in life is caused by attachment, that the main challenge that everyone has to take care of oneself. I maintain my relationships naturally without needing to attach to any loved one. I behave in a more comprehensive, serene, and compassionate way with people with whom I interact. End quote.
Those are good lessons. The most important part is your conclusions and what we learned from NDE's experiences. Are we in a gigantic soul farm being harvested? Why don't we learn from our past suffering and hardships? Are we here to feed a collective energy like predators?
Yeah, so I mean, what conclusions can we draw from this phenomenon known as the near-death experience? First, there are NDEs that support the notion that we do indeed live in a holographic matrix and that this life here on Earth is an illusion or dreamlike. There are a few dozen who got the impression that life is a game or a form of entertainment. Earth is said to be a school where we keep coming back until we've learned all our lessons, but we don't even remember this fact while we're here, which seems counterproductive. You would think we'd at least be able to remember that we're in a school to learn and not have our complete memory wiped. And at school, we get constant feedback on how we're doing with exams and grades. We know whether we're passing a course or not and where we stand. As I mentioned earlier, we have 7 billion souls on the planet now. We've presumably been reincarnating here for thousands of years. I mean, how many lives does it take a collective to learn, especially a collective that is supposed to be God? Now, NDErs claim they know everything and have access to all knowledge while in the light. They say we are here on Earth to learn. Why would we need to come to Earth to learn if knowledge is so readily available there? And we still haven't learned enough about love. And then it's implied that the learning never ends and we move on to new planets and new star systems. It seems like God could think of a better, more efficient system for learning with less suffering and hardship. Many do not want to come back or send back against their will. That doesn't sound so loving to me, making somebody do something against their own free will. I don't see the need for a system where creatures literally have to feed off each other just to survive. It seems very barbaric to me, and they just give an insight into what's really going on, even at the astral level. About 1% of the experiences mentioned seeing aliens, including the gray aliens seen in abduction experiences. The similarities to the abduction phenomenon is a cause for concern, as the conclusion of many prominent researchers in that field is that they do not have our best interests in mind and that they are indeed harvesting our souls for energy. I think given the evidence that we can manifest our own reality with our consciousness, then we should not need to rely on any external light seen at death. After all, we are light ourselves. Everything is energy, a continuum of frequency, and there are realms or dimensions far beyond the white light, and we should set our intentions on raising our frequency and ascending to the highest frequency. Since frequency is a wavelength, we would actually be going within ourselves. We do not need to even take any form at all, and we can exist as pure awareness or energy. But when we die, we can create our own reality. It can travel by thought or intent. Unfortunately, other entities may try to usurp our sovereignty or free will and trick us into doing their will and willingly give them our energy. They're nothing more than holograms that are external projections from our own divine light inside us. There are entities who pretend to be family or angelic beings. In my opinion, they should be ignored, as their only purpose is to get the soul to eventually reincarnate yet again to be a source of food. We can raise the vibrational level of our soul, which is light. Just keep increasing the vibration of your spirit as much as you possibly can by using your focused, willful intent, and you will ascend in frequency and travel inward back to the source of that divine light in the eternal light realm. This means ignoring any distractions that try to lure you to light or attract a being. You'll eventually arrive at what the Gnostics call the eternal light realm, or the height of heights, the light of lights. This should be our spirit's natural, original state. You just keep increasing the spirit's vibration or frequency until you arrive at the highest frequency, which may manifest as the purest light, the absolute truth, and unconditional love. So I'd really like to hear from people about their experiences, whether they believe we are learning and growing here through suffering, and whether they believe our spirit and God are evolving, whether or not our spirits are sovereign. My email address is waynejbush@gmail.com. That's WAYNE, the letter J, BUSH@gmail.com. Thanks for having me on your show, Mark. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks a bunch to you, Wayne. It was really big, and I hope you give our listeners some food for thought and not food for archons, because that's what we're here for, and that we someday will get past the archonic filters in the afterlife realms, and that we know what's awaiting us in the astral projection, that's afterlife, and we don't have to experience an NDE to understand what you all explained, and really thank you for all this enlightenment with the real light and the false light, and thank you so much, guys, and we'll see you very soon, and I hope that you enjoyed Wayne, and this is his second interview about NDEs experiencers, and this was a real eye-opener for everyone, I'm hoping. We'll see you next month. Thank you, Wayne.
Yeah, positive thoughts and higher frequency until we get home.
Yes, exactly. Precisely.
Bye, Mark.
See you later, guys. Bye-bye.